minutes away from Disneyland precisely. Straight down Anaheim Boulevard, right? No, I'm sorry, Catella. You get straight, leave the Disneyland parking lot. You're on Catella. Take it straight down to Long Beach, no turns, and then my house was right there in the suburban neighborhood in Long Beach. You just go all the way straight. Can't miss it. So I remember and I would get off because I worked in the parking lot. I would get off at like 2 a.m. a lot, my shift, because I had to make sure, even if the park closed at 12, you still had to make sure that the shoppers, they got out to the car, and you had to help people, all the lost people, get their cars and stuff. And you had to be the last one out of the parking lot, basically. And I remember leaving, and I got onto Catella, and I don't remember anything else. And then I pulled up to the driveway and hit the brakes, and I'm like, oh, I blacked out the entire time. I had no memory of driving 30 minutes to get home through all those signals. It was the freakiest experience, and I've heard people having those, and they typically happen with, like, paranormal, experiences. Like, people will say they see a UFO or something, and then they black out for, like, an hour or 2. It was nothing. I didn't see any lights or anything like that. It was the weirdest thing. Like, it was like no time had passed, split second. I'm 30 minutes down the road pulling into my driveway. Shabbat shalom, everybody. And let's just get right to it. What I have to present tonight is for those of you who have been following the mud flood narrative for the last year, last 6 months, the last 7 years, however long you've been in this. What I'm going to present tonight, some of you will be like, okay, Noel, this is actually not original. This is just what we've been talking about. That may be true, but I haven't talked about it yet. And as you guys know, I'm working feverishly towards further editions of my research, my book, Millennial Kingdom plus Mudflood. And one of the things I didn't do the first time around is I really was focusing on just all original work, using multiple texts, using scripture, and trying to form a picture of what it looked like in terms of the timeline and so on and so forth. Tonight, I'm not going to be quoting from too much scripture. We're going to be looking more at the footprints of the set apart who lived in the millennial kingdom. So, with that, let's get right to it. This is called Kings and Priests of the Millennial Kingdom. And there is on the cover Notre Dame before she burned down. And my wife and I, when we went to France back before, I can't say it, before the the disease was spread around this motionless plane, we were there, and we arrived in Paris probably like 1 week after it burned down, after that whole ceremony. And, there was still all the police tape around it, and there was, investigators and people, all looking at it. And so it looks very different now. The rooftop is completely shaved off. But as you can see, by Noel Joshua Hadley, first published September 29th, 2022. And those are the contents so far. This is one of those papers, like many that I developed. I'm developing them now in hopes of just expanding on them as new ideas come. And so I've got, so many under my belt that I can just go add little bits here and there. That's another good reason you want to check the front page of my website, the Unexpected Cosmology. I'm always posting the updates. If I add a 3 or 4 new pages to a paper that's 2, 3 years old, I'm going to let you know, and I put it on there. So always keep a lookout for that. We are starting on page 5, and it's called A Royal Priesthood. The answer you probably weren't looking for or even expecting is Smog, but I will tell you about him anyways. The dragon from J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit lore is how many might imagine themselves staking out their treasures in heaven if they're being honest with themselves. Yahusha said there would be treasures in heaven, and Smog, as you may or may not know, was a treasure hoarder. He sat upon his pile all day, every day, 24/7 for decades on end. And already I'm sure there's like Tolkien experts out there saying, no, no, you're so wrong. You're getting, stop, stop messing up with his lore. I'm trying to get Tolkien correct. Let me try this again. 24/7 for decades on end, wanting every last trinket for themselves. Then again, it takes a dragon heart to amass the dragon's hoard. And that is why I'm here to tell you that the complete opposite was true regarding the kings and priests of the millennial kingdom. Don't get me wrong, they were most certainly prosperous, wealthy, rich. They were probably the richest people who ever walked the earth. But then look at how Yahushua HaMashiach describes their fortunes. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust do corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust do corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Mattatyahu chapter 6, 19 through 21. Yahushua had in mind a treasure which is in direct correlation with the desires of one's heart. The treasure hoarders are also mentioned here. Those things are perishable and easily stolen and cannot be accounted for in their resurrection. It is only the serviceable heart which secures a foothold, telling us that a completely different type of wealth is being described. The person who cares for the widow and the orphan, feeding the hungry and clothing the poor, as well as tending to the sick, and so on and so on. You guys all know the passages of scripture I'm referring to, will be rewarded for their efforts in such a way as to continue doing the same in the resurrection, but with a dramatically expanded measure of responsibility. The parable of the talents in Matthew 25:14-30 comes to mind. You will have to read it for yourself. There are others. But with the parable of the talents, the wise servants became elevated servants upon the master's return, with added responsibility and a pocketbook to show for it. That embellished role is further described for us in Revelation, wherein we read the following: And he that overcomes and guards my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron. As the vessels of a potter shall they be broken to shivers, even as I received of my Father. Revelation 2, 26 through 27. Those who overcame the world and guarded the commands of Elohim by the time of his arrival, though here it says Yahusha's works, which is the same thing, were promised co-rulership over the nations, complete with a rod of iron to show for it. I know it doesn't outright say priest here. It is referring to a royal priesthood nonetheless. And I'm not going to go into a whole lesson about that tonight. The same royal priesthood which Yahuwah the Most High Elohim intended for Yasharel at Sinai in Exodus 19:6, though they rejected the offer. You have to keep reading in Revelation to uncover a fuller description. And this is what it says in chapter 20, verses 4 through 6. And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Yahusha and for the word of Elohim, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Mashiach 1,000 years. Now, pause here. I'm just going to quickly comment that I am constantly told that I am stealing the hopes of all those people who want to reign with him for 1,000 years. And I it's I have to ask those people, uh, are you planning on being beheaded and of course rejecting the mark? Because that seems to be a requirement here. It seems to be a description of those people. And there's been, according to the official narrative, 2,000 years that have passed where a bunch of people's hopes have been stolen because they did not reject the mark nor um, get beheaded. Just a little side note there. I'm not stealing those people's hopes. Those people's hopes have been stolen for them, according to the official narrative, of course. But the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. Oh boy, that's an interesting verse, which I will not be commenting on tonight. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is he that has part in the first resurrection. On such the second death has no power. But they shall be priests of Elohim, there it is, and of Mashiach, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. I took out the marker on two separate sentences so as to move our congregation, our conversation along. As you can see, it starts out describing those who would live and reign with Mashiach for 1,000 years, indicating the millennial kings and priests. But then it states that they would also be priests of Elohim. We have before us a description of what I believe is the Melchizedek priesthood, which is another study altogether. Again, also, did you catch the part about the rest of the dead living again, but not until after the 1,000 years were finished? I suspect that's referring to us, possibly. We are the dead, living again. Though most people nowadays, it seems, are the walking dead. For now, I will leave it up to you to consider those implications. What I aim to demonstrate over the following so many pages involve the wealth of these kings and priests who co ruled with Mashiach. Though again, I reckon it is not as most have cared to imagine. The blueprints of their hearts still remain in some capacity. Our controllers have tried their darndest to mutilate his story, twisting and contorting their servitude into something closer resembling a dragon's hoard. In reality, though, a careful examination of the cathedrals spanning our flat, motionless plane tell us far more about the architects who designed them than history books would dare to have us know. And this section right here is going to be dedicated to Rebecca. This is the section that she let me in on. It is called Royal Pains, and as you can see right there, we have a picture of toilets. We are told those are Roman toilets, and apparently they were not fond of stalls. They just like to line up there side by side and talk about the weather. Indoor plumbing was a Roman pastime. The Romans designed entire aqueducts necessary for the transportation of water into bathhouses and public toilets, sometimes from 100 kilometers away. They were so adept at the toilet game that they'd line entire rooms full of them so that men or women could sit around and appreciate the plumbing without taking a break from conversation. That is, hopefully, I spelled break right, Rebecca. That is all you really need to know about history, that the Romans had indoor plumbing, but not the wealthy elites, the most noblest of knights, nor the kings and priests of medieval times, all of whom inherited Roman advancements in sanitation, but were incapable of telling the difference between toilet paper and a pine cone. Because it was the Dark Ages, you see. It would take Queen Elizabeth I's godson, Sir John Harrington, to create the first flushing toilet in 1596 as soon as the Dark Ages were over, and then finally somebody named Thomas Crapper to turn it into an art form in the 1860s. Among the hundreds of church and abbey projects in medieval England alone, the construction of each structure took an average of 250 to 300 years, if you can believe that. I couldn't believe that when I read that this week. I'm like, you kidding? You serious? Think 250 to 300 years to build these cathedrals. In all that time, and we're talking entire father to son to son to son to son to son to son building projects, nobody was remotely concerned about the pooping problem. You think somebody would connect a couple of tubes together and then tell the king or queen they'd solved their stink issues, hoping for a raise. Much like NASA's inability to return to the moon some 50 years after the fact, they had lost the technology to design plumbing, and it was far too painful to build it up again. That must be it. You are apparently looking at a medieval toilet right this very moment. Don't stand too close. I'd also suggest closing your mouth while staring up at it because that's the pee hole you're standing under. It is generally known as a garderobe, if I'm pronouncing that right, garderobe, though other names include the drought, gong, siege house, necessarium, and my personal favorite, golden tower. We are told the castle residents would carefully line up one hole with another and then have a bowel movement. The squat would then splatter down the wall and into the moat. Well, if the water didn't keep the dragon out, then I'm sure the sludge did the trick. Who knew the first long drops originated from a penthouse? If you thought you felt a breeze from 2 feet off the earth, then try 40 feet up. On a shrill, windswept English morning, that hole had to have been whistling. How many gong drops were there in any given castle exactly? I tried getting to the bottom of that question, but to no avail. I've got two bathrooms in my house, and with two sons, a wife, and a daughter, it's rarely enough. Imagine an entire castle after the chef didn't wash his hands or the mayonnaise went bad. There simply aren't enough holes. I'm only counting one. If the only other golden tower were on the opposite end of the castle, and by the way, a lot of the castles I looked at, I didn't see any golden towers. So this is just one example they throw at you at the official website. Imagine the pain and the agony. Have you ever sprinted up or down those spiraling towers while clenching the butt cheeks? Talk about impossible engineering. The pooping problem has led me in the past to claim that the people who inhabited these castle walls, as well as cathedrals and palaces, were breatharians. Breatharian, I'm probably pronouncing, I mispronounce all words, guys. Just hang with me here. A breatharian is somebody who does not require food or water for his or her day to day living needs. No obligatory digestion system. A breatharian simply receives energy directly from the ether, much as a plant would. Somebody who fully devotes themselves to the lifestyle would begin to de-age within several years, or so I'm told. My attempt in attributing the Breatharian concept to the resurrected kings and priests of Messiah's kingdom was a noble effort and probably very close to the truth, but still extremely limiting, when in fact the set apart feasted and feasted well. The seven cyclical holy days of Yahuwah alone would frustrate any Breatharian schedule. You'd think they would have needed plumbing then. You know who else didn't have bathrooms? The children of Yasharel, while wandering through the wilderness, didn't have bathrooms. The camp was something like 12 square miles. No bathrooms and no plumbing required. Imagine having to carry your pot for 6 entire miles every time you wanted to dump it for sanitary purposes. I've heard tall tales regarding backpackers carrying their poop out in plastic baggies during a weekend camping trip, but we're talking 40 years of potty business. It's the poop problem all over again, which has long been discussed in theological circles. Well, I think I finally figured out what was going on during the Millennial Kingdom. This comes from Revelation 2:17. He that has an ear, let him hear what the Ruach says into the called out assemblies. To him that overcomes will I give to eat of the hidden manna, and will give him a white stone, and in the stone a new name written, which no man knows, saving he that receives it. They ate manna, just as the children of Yasharel once did in the wilderness. Before you go and ask me for evidence of this manna's whereabouts, as if the leftovers would be sold in the castle souvenir gift shop, need I remind you that it is hidden manna. I couldn't possibly know where that is. A closed mouth catches no flies, and the resurrected sainthood aren't talking. Here is another clue in all of this. So this is a slightly longer read. This comes from the Legends of the Jews, Volume 3. There were good reasons for not exceeding a day's ration in the daily downpour of manna. Now, this, of course, contextually, this is talking about the children in the wilderness. First, that they might be spared the need of carrying it on their wandering. Secondly, that they might daily receive it hot. Kind of interesting. This is talking about why they collected it each day, except for Sabbath. And lastly, that they might day by day depend upon Elohim's aid, and in this way exercise themselves in faith. While the people were still abed, Elohim fulfilled their desire and rained down manna for them. For this food had been created on the second day of creation and ground by the angels. It later descended for the wanderers in the wilderness. The mills are stationed in the third heaven, where manna is constantly being ground for the future use of the pious. For and by the way, the Legends of the Jews also takes my synopsis. So if you refer back to the study I did, was it a year ago? I don't know how long ago. On the seven firmaments of heaven, that there's literally seven worlds above us, and so this would be three worlds above us, three floors above us. Manna deserves its name, bread of the angels, not only because it is prepared by them, but because those who partake of it become equal to the angels in strength, and furthermore, like them, have no need of easing themselves, as manna is entirely dissolved in the body. Not until they sinned did they have to ease themselves like ordinary mortals. Manna also showed its heavenly origin in the miraculous flavor it possessed. There was no need of cooking or baking it, nor did it require any other preparation, and still it contained the flavor of every conceivable dish. One had only to desire a certain dish, and no sooner had the thought of it than manna had the flavor of the dish desired. The same food had a different taste to everyone who partook of it, according to his age. To the little children, it tasted like milk. To the strong youths, like bread. To the old men, like honey. To the sick, like barley, steeped in oil and honey. Legends of the Jews, Volume 3. Manna is the grain of heaven, grounded and prepared by culinary angels. It is also the food of angels, according to Psalm 78, 24 through 25. So that backs that up there. No wonder why so many people whined like disgruntled ponies after realizing they'd be eating that stuff every day for 40 years. Never mind the fact that angels eat manna every single day for an eternity and think being a badass soldier with a flaming sword and a chariot with flames decal is a sweet gig. I guess that just goes to show those inadequate souls who don't desire heaven here on earth. Think the food of heaven isn't worthy of them. Can you imagine having to delight in it for 1,000 years then? Waking up to the piping hot aroma of the boulangerie assaulting your senses every morning, and then being told to fill up the breadbasket to your delight. Such a burden, I'm sure. Baklava is for chumps. Baklava, they say, is also the food of gods. Well, manna is the real food of the gods. Not too long ago, I caught another screening of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, reading about how the manna will take on any dish or flavor which its connoisseur wishes. I'm reminded of that scene where Violet Beauregard grabs the experimental gum right out of Willy Wonka's hands and then proceeds to chew upon it. She tasted hot and creamy tomato soup and then roast beef and a baked potato for the second course. The blueberry pie and cream are what did her in. She blew up like a balloon, being so full of desserts. The Oompa Loompas had to roll her off to the garderobe to squeeze it out of her. Ro- Roald Dahl, I can never pronounce his name, Roald Dahl, must have been in the know because that's precisely what it was like for naughty little children during Messiah's kingdom. Look what else it says in Legends of the Jews. The manna would be set out for the children of Yasharel in the future world. That's speaking of Messiah's kingdom on earth. They ate manna daily, still prepared by the angels. You figure the sinners had nothing better to do than rebel against a perfectly good thing, which is precisely why they would need their own lineup of celebrities, men like Thomas Crapper. Because that's the other thing. Immortals had no need of easing themselves, as manna is entirely dissolved in the body. No wonder why they didn't need bathrooms. The castles and the cathedrals and the palaces of old were built for the saint rather than the sinner. Sure, a mortal might swipe some manna from grandma's cabinet, but they'd be paying a visit to the Golden Tower on their way out. The Oompa Loompas probably ended up drilling that pee hole in the first place so as to cart them there. All right, so getting into that was kind of a long introduction, really, but let's just really get into it now. This is on page 14. If you you thought he was RJ Crapper, might have been, I don't know. Uh, Good vibrations, the sematics of sacred spaces. And so, what we're going to be looking at for the rest of this is the the personality and the riches of these kings and priests according to the designs of the cathedrals and the sacred spaces themselves. Architecture is frozen music. The cathedral builders were well aware of that fact. Contrarily, you can think of music as liquid architecture. But getting back to the cathedral builders, their own designs testify to their appreciation for the healing principles of sound when administered properly. Sound itself is the vibration of molecules within any medium. You might even say it is a creative force which holds the popsicle sticks and glue or of our physical world in form. It all comes down to sematics. What is sematics? I will explain. Sematics was a term first coined by Hans Jenny in the 1970s. It is the study of geometric patterns created by sound vibrations. Turn the page and you will see what I mean. We'll get there in a second. In 2013, artist Tanya Harris set about to demonstrate the hidden reality of the cathedrals of old via sematics, or as she described it, the subtle vibrations through which all life manifests itself. Harris's experiment involved recording the sound of silence in a series of churches, none of which I am sad to say included the Simon and Garfunkel song. Those which she targeted were specifically said to have been designed by English architect Nicholas Hawksmoor. And I think the reason she did that, it makes sense on a scientific experiment that if you're going to um, you follow the different sounds that were created by the same said architect. They are all four pictured above and are left to right St. George, Bloomsbury in London, St. George in the East, um, also London, and, that should just be St. George in the East, not St. George, St. George. Um, Also London, as well as, Christ Church and St. Anne's Church, again, London. Pay attention to the order because I will follow it in future references. So if you wanna just glance up at the top of the page again, 14, you can see those 4 churches, boom, 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 that I just mentioned, and the experiment will line up with those same pictures in that order on the next page. Harris then played the recordings back while recording the sound again to gain an amplified recording. By placing water inside of a loudspeaker, Harris was capable of translating the silence into the liquid architecture of cymatics, the results of which are nothing short of astonishing. So, once again, we see the same 4 floor designs of those 4 churches, and then the shape of the sacred geometry of the silence that was recorded in each of those churches. It's nothing short of just astonishing. The floor plans of all 4 churches are shown above. What Harris discovered is a hidden sound busily orchestrating symmetrical laws which coincide with the same geometric blueprint evident throughout nature. I have shown those results. The cathedral builders may not have been visually imitating nature. No, brighter minds were cultivating it, and in such a way as to masterfully create harmonious expressions which were intended to conform to the golden ratio. Is that a 5-pointed star on the far right? It is. And if I'm not mistaken, the resulting patterns look an awful lot like the rose windows found in cathedrals across the realm, which we'll get to tonight. Think about how much of your body consists of water, and then ask yourself, what sort of patterns would you rather exemplify? Our molecules will manifest into something beautiful or hideously ugly, depending upon the music or words thrust upon them. Now, what I didn't do here, and I will be talking about this when I get to the star forts and also the star cities, is showing the experiments of vibrations and lights and with water molecules and even frozen water, and how they change to something gloriously beautiful with kind words and loving words, and hideously ugly with something like "I hate you." You know, that just it actually manifests reality around us. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about that over the last few weeks as I've been digging into this, and I I I've just been starting to go around my neighborhood and just say nice things and praise Yah, and just, trying to manifest that reality around me rather than going around and saying terrible words and, and curses and such, which would create a dark, ominous, hideously ugly reality around me. Professor Sung Chil Ji of Rutgers University found that red blood cells exposed to classical music have a significantly improved lifespan. What I aim to show is that every facet of the cathedral was designed with the physical health and spiritual longevity of humanity in mind. Look at this beauty here. So this, of course, is in the United Kingdom, and I really think that the most beautiful cathedrals we're going to find are really in France and England. Though we're going to find them in other places like Germany and Italy and such. Symmetrical spires and spikes can be found on countless cathedrals across our realm. The painful part in all of this is that we were duped into thinking they were designed merely for decorative purposes. Yeah, right. And I'm not simply talking about the steeple either. A Gothic palace or cathedral might have dozens, if not hundreds, of spires rising from its various rooftops. Every aspect of these buildings was intended to serve a purpose. Nothing went wasted. And while I can't sit here and pretend like I have it all figured out, I certainly don't, or that the breadth of their knowledge in designing these buildings is fully appreciated by myself, and it's not. What seems evident is that the ornamental spires were used to extract ether from the ionosphere. They were places of worship, but also energy harvesting power stations. And I want to make clear here that there's a big trend out there to say that these were not places of worship. I think that's ridiculous. Uh, this was built by higher beings, and it was all directed to worship of Yahuwah. And it's very clear that it was intended for people to enter them. Ever since Benjamin Franklin flew a kite in Philadelphia during the Great Lightning Storm of 1752, the historians have had their work cut out for them, writing revisions as to the true motive of his experiment. Some have even insisted as of late that the entire episode was fabricated, as if that's not ironic. Otherwise, you have to wonder about all these golden cake toppers on buildings everywhere. Were they also only intended for decorative use until Franklin came along? Or was it Alessandro Volta? Edison, perhaps? Ridiculous. And I just showed one picture there, but you guys can see what I'm talking about. You guys know those are everywhere, probably in your own city. They're just everywhere all across our realm. Turns out it's not that difficult to find mansions and palaces, not to mention homes, schools, and courthouses even, that include a design capable of extracting free energy from the ether. There wouldn't even be enough pages available in my paper arsenal to cover them all. They're everywhere. All pretty trimmings and garnishes, apparently. And you can see that I love this illustration, and it just shows, castle turrets and castles, and you know all sort all sorts of different buildings there that they all look similar, take on the same designs. It looked like they were intended to function similarly. So we're on page 18, and you can just scroll past this slowly and look at those beautiful buildings. Copper and gold make for excellent conductors of electricity. Now, you would think the cathedral builders knew a thing or two about it then, but no. We see domes in cathedrals, but also in mansions and palaces. None of these builders understood what a dome is good for, apparently, with all that flamboyant, tutti frutti king's money they had to work with. And yet, their intended purpose couldn't be any more obvious for anyone paying attention. Once harvested from the ether, the energy would have inevitably been drawn down into these dome structures. Uh, they're cavity resonators. Aesthetically, the inside of these domes doesn't disappoint. Seriously, have you ever stood under one of them? You'll cramp your neck. Such perfect symmetry, though. And this one here, the one on the bottom left is from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, and I've personally stood under that one, and it's stunning. I mean, it's beautiful. I remember standing under that and just thinking. I remember thinking, like, how did they build this thing? This is why it's unbelievable. You just that someone comes along and they tell you, oh, Constantine, or whoever, and I think it was his mother Helena or whatever, and you just accept it, right? Well, that must be it. Such perfect symmetry, as I said, and and underdeveloped people built these. Yeah, right. And they did it all for looks, apparently. As we are told, they had no function whatsoever except for ornamentation and mood setting. Because nothing passes the offering plate around a second time quite like a dome, you see. How very strange of them, then, to include cavities in the design. And no, I'm not talking about permanent damage to your teeth either. Look closer, squint your eyes if need be. The cavities I'm referring to are in the masonry and just so happen to take on the peculiar look of cavity resonators. You can see on the bottom right picture. Actually, I think on all the pictures on the right there, you can see them in there. In the world of electromagnetism, cavity resonators work through symmetry to produce oscillation or vibration of energetic particles. Symmetrical shapes force energetic particles or ions to vibrate in a constant manner, and bada bing, electromagnetic fields are extracted for use. It's the little details. Oh, there's a cup. Yeah, that one. You could see that one in the next picture there. How they stripped them out. You could see where they stripped them out. Many domes across the realm have had their cavity resonators removed, but not all of them. The dome on the left is one such victim. It has been stripped of its ornamentation. A magnetron emits powerful microwaves that can act as a source of free energy, and so breaking the symmetry or closing the vacuum will handicap its intended use. But then look at the dome on the right. Its cavities appear to have remained. A better term might be cavity magnetrons. A cavity magnetron is a high powered vacuum tube that generates microwaves using the interaction of a stream of ions in partnership with a magnetic field while in the cavity resonator. I know that's really wordy, but I'm pulling this stuff from the Wikipedia as I look it up too. All of which operates through a hollow symmetrical vacuum. It's all a bit technical, and I You can do your own research on all this stuff on the wiki. All of our microwaves have magnetrons inside. See for yourself. We are told the first cavity magnetron wasn't brought to the US by the British until 1940. And that somebody named Albert W. Hole, who was also known for his research in vacuum tubes and X ray crystallography, first developed the magnetron in 1916. Sure, let's go with that. Now, just so we're clear, we talked about this a lot in this group that there are patents and designs and discoveries that come along all the time, and they will tell us about it in the news. Oh, look what we can do now. And the fact of the matter is they've been doing it for decades, if not centuries, but they're just now telling us about it. And it's the same thing where the mud flood happens and we go back to the dark ages, and then they create the industrial revolution and they start discovering all these things that were there in front of us all along. That's basically what's happening. We are on page 21. And you can see there that those are the rose windows I was talking about earlier. The rose windows seen everywhere on cathedrals undoubtedly had a part to play. The originals wouldn't have included stained glass, though. At least that's the general consensus, I think, amongst most. Once again, it is the glass which immobilizes their intended use. The fact that they take on the sacred geometry of light and vibration should be our first clue that something much more than meets the eye is going on. But then check out the cloisters. I'll tell you what, I've walked the halls of some serious cloisters in my day, but none quite like what the architects built for themselves at Gloucester Cathedral. I mean, that is like unbelievable right there. Cavities on the ceiling, rose windows, sacred geometry. This is the sort of frozen music that light and vibrations built. The intricate design of it all. Doesn't it make you want to write poetry? They certainly don't build hallways like they used to. A cloister, if you must know, is a covered walkway running along the walls of cathedrals, but surrounding a central quad, forming what is called a quadrangle. We can only I mean, you can. I walked plenty of those in Europe, and so you see the main building there, and then the the hallway jets out, into like a rectangle or a square, and it's covered all the way around. We can only theorize how the space might have been utilized inside, but I'm imagining the most delightful garden, pleasing to all the senses. Now that I think about it, maybe that's where the manna ended up every morning. Maybe they went and collected the manna there in the dew. And with produce worthy of the kings and priests who once ministered from these great halls. These two pictured derive from Canterbury and Salisbury Cathedral. Look at that word if you haven't already, cathode. The name alone should nab our attention. Sounds an lot like cathedral, don't it? A cathode is defined as the electrode from which a conventional current leaves a polarized electrical device. Similarly, a catheter is a flexible tube inserted through a narrow opening into a body cavity, particularly the bladder, for removing fluid. Turn to Webster, and the cath in cathedral has lost all meaning. I wonder why. At one time, every rose window would have had one of them, a cathode, that is. Most cathodes have been removed, but once in a while, we can still find structures in which traces of the old cathode are still present. And you can see that one there in the rose window. It's still protruding, at least the shell of it, out the middle. They would just, no, they would take that out and fill that in with glass now. In every instance, the cavity resonators and magnetrons would have had to have worked in partnership with some sort of central engine. And I'll give you a chance to kind of look at those there. What are those? Those are baptismals. Most likely, the engine itself would have been similar to what we know today as a fusion reactor. The cathedrals of old have those. Our controllers may have removed the engines, but not the outer shell. We know them today as baptistries. If you stop and think about it, nothing will seem more certain. The kings and priests of the millennial kingdom would have baptized people in living water, natural springs of running water. Their cities were of geometric patterns and already dependent upon natural bodies or irrigated rivers, sometimes even streets of water. And I'll talk more about that when we do finally get to the Star Force and the Star Cities, and they were all built with water. And if it wasn't natural water, they irrigated the water. Nobody would have entered into a cathedral for the purposes of baptism. And so they had other uses. I mean, you think about it, it makes total sense. Wherever the hollowed bodies of these once engines exist beyond the confines of a cathedral, say in a central square or city quad, our controllers usually designate them as bandstands. And there's a couple there. I don't know if the one on the right still exists. It might. Some have come to suspect that these fusion reactors would have worked similarly to a tokamak. A tokamak is a device which uses a powerful magnetic field to confine plasma in the shape of a torus. If 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 you're not electrically minded and you struggle with this, that's okay. It's really wordy, but I kid you not. You can look up all these words. I put them on purple here. Go look them up. Wiki. It's they'll lay it all out for you. In geometry, a torus is a surface of revolution generated by revolving a circle in three-dimensional space about an axis that is uh, coplanar with the circle. That's a big word right there. Colloquially, it might be described with the visual pleasantries of a donut. Sounds delicious. All right, so here's one right here that I find this one fascinating. You can see there we're on page 25. If you look closely, you can see the Leaning Tower of Pisa in the background, which again, that's they say maybe it was an earthquake or that the ground started becoming a little less level, but in a mud flood that is and when the ground, if it were to turn just into like a liquid and just like roll up and down, and it very likely lean for those reasons. We have one such tower in Charleston, St. Philip's, which is also crooked, just like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And they say it was an earthquake that did in the mid 1800s, but it's very likely the mud flood. This is what it says on the Wikipedia. The Pisa Baptistry of St. John, that's that huge building in the foreground. It's a Roman Catholic ecclesiastical building in Pisa, Italy. Construction started in 1152 to replace an older baptistry. And when it was completed in 1363, it became the second building in chronological order and the so on and so forth. So just pay attention to those dates. Sometimes the engines were so large that they required a separate adjacent building. The baptistry of St. John and Pisa is one such example of that. The official narrative has construction starting in 1152 with a completion date of 1363. And that's smack dab in the center of the Dark Ages, by the way. That's 211 years. Are they serious? A guy named Diotisalvi, man, I'm sorry I butchered his name, handed in a design so intricately detailed that it would require 2 centuries and some change, generations of manpower, and an untold fortune simply to build a dunking pool. Yeah, right. Are you buying that dribble? Galileo was said to have been baptized there, by the way. How adorable. I find myself referring to Florence Cathedral often, and it is difficult not to. But here is something which I purposely neglected in past papers. Notice the large octagonal shaped building they've got out back. It's another baptistry. We are told it is one of the oldest buildings in the city, constructed between 1059 and 1128 for a total of 69 years. I guess that's even more smack dab right in the middle of the Millennial Kingdom if we're going by official dates. It's even older than the cathedral which it is intended to serve, seeing as how Florence Cathedral wouldn't begin construction until 1296. So they built the baptistry before the cathedral, centuries before it. Construction lasted until 1436 for a grand total of 140 years. I guess the Florence congregants must have pulled out collapsible chairs from the janitor closet week after week and met under the shadow of the baptistry for 308 years, passing around the offering plate, dreaming big. I hear summers in Florence are lovely. Hmm. They built the most lavish baptistry imaginable before ever getting around to the house of worship. I checked. Florence has the Arno River for baptism purposes. Also, the 17-foot tall gilded doors weighing 4.5 tons each. Who was baptizing these people? Giants? Here's a baptistry, the bottom of page 26. Here's a baptistry in Zika Monastery near Kraljevo, Serbia. It would seem completely impractical being outside. And you see there, like they just put a little bird bath there. Though it is also octagonal shaped, hinting us as to its original design. Page 27. Chateau de Chambord in France is a castle which I have had the pleasure of investigating in person. Perhaps I will finally get around to detailing the total cognitive dissonance it takes to appreciate this architectural wonder in the face of the official narrative. At present, and we will get to it tonight, just so you know. At present, however, you should be able to see the series of rooftop towers. Call them bandstands or baptistries, lighthouses, even. Call them whatever you'd like. They're empty. Every last one of them. The story we are told is that the palace was built as a hunting lodge for King Francis I, and that Leonardo da Vinci was its probable designer, one of the Ninja Turtles. I'm sure that's why they're empty. King Francis ordered a hunting lodge, and so Da Vinci told him to plant his bum in a tower of his liking and knight the next deer that came along soon as it dipped its head for a drink in the dragon moat. Sure, that must be it. Of course, I am sounding like a broken record by this point when stating that these empty spaces can be found all over the world. More often than not, the octagonal shells can be found directly below spires, or steeples, or domed resonators. And when they are not, their position is practical in relation to the structure which they are intended to complement. I really like these here. These are really I could stare at these in a museum for hours. These are just beautiful, beautiful. Our controllers didn't know what to do with these reliquaries, like reliquaries, and that's I guess what they're called. Took me a while to figure that out, as they are often called, which can likewise be found adorning the rooms of the same palaces and cathedrals and probably 100 other locations across our realm. And so they have repurposed them for the displays of something so simple as a holy finger bone, for the saints have yet to resurrect, you see, as if that is what they were designed for. I'm seriously like they'll have one of these and just put like a little finger bone in it. Look closely. The reliquaries are not so different from the many empty towers, baptistries, and bandstands which we have already seen, complete with the spikes and spires of cathedrals. They are empty shells, because apparently the medieval designers enjoyed crafting things from precious metals by which nothing would be placed within them. It is rare to find any photo which might hint as to what the original engine looked like, but we do have them. You are probably looking at one right now. This one happens to be my personal favorite, mainly because we can see a bandstand and a mystery object surrounded by workers and the buttons, and probably the mayor for all I know. My guess is a free energy device is under arrest for crimes against humanity and taking a permanent leave of absence to the junkyard behind the FEMA camp. You figure there were hundreds of pictures such as this one in decades past, and then every so often one slips past the goalie net, which is the kind of the little blurry image we have right there. And then we have these here. As I was saying, the photo opportunities are rare. There are other citadels, however, which appear to display the same mystery object as we have seen in the bandstand. One might relegate these to a lighthouse, but then I will again remind you of the bandstand. The contraption sits no more than a foot off the ground. Was that intended as a lighthouse as well? And then we see here, it's like a postcard, I guess, not exactly a photo. Well, there is a photo on the right. It is the sketch, however, which gives interesting insight to the absences of another era. The context of both the postcard and the picture involves the construction of the, I guess we call it the finials of Cologne Cathedral, a shaft surrounded by leaf wreaths of different sizes, which was claimed to have been built in the whereabouts of 1880. Its master builder, quote unquote, was Ernest Frederick Zwerner, who based his plans on the original medieval facade, anyways. So what they're saying is that there was you can see the blueprints that these were originally designed to go on it, but then like hundreds of years later they show them building it on there. Let's assume for the moment that Cologne did receive its medieval steeples in the late 19th century. Rather interesting then that they were placing one of them mystery engines into it. Wouldn't you agree? Purely ornamentation, I'm sure. Seems like this was more the matter of home remodeling and they were stripping the cathedral of its intended use. Because where is the money and free health? Look at that man standing there by his lonesome, proud of his building project, probably a spokesman for the pharmaceutical companies. Page 31. I need to stop for a drink. An electromagnetic coil is an electrical conductor, such as a wire in the shape of a coil, which one or more turns with one or more turns designed to produce and ultimately increase the strength of a magnetic field. Coils produce vortexes, which in turn create an electromagnetic field. The magnetic fields generated by the wires turns will pass through the center of the coil. The more turns of the wire on the coil, the stronger the magnetic field will be. Today, electromagnetic coils are common in the world of electrical engineering. You'll find you'll find there in applications where electrical currents interact with magnetic fields, such as electric motors, generators, inductors, electromagnets, transformers, and sensor coils. But it was not always so, apparently. We are told British scientist William Sturgeon invented the electromagnet in 1824. There it is again. Right after the mud flood, they start rolling these inventions and discoveries out using a horseshoe shaped piece of iron that was wrapped with about 18 turns of bare copper wire. And then, you look at those pictures there. Bottom of page 32. Sturgeon's discovery is a laughable explanation, having no bearing on the reality we can observe around us, as electromagnetic coils are everywhere. They are featured among the columns and rotundas in the structures as well as the landscapes of old. They are even randomly found in gardens. The columns and rotundas were probably designed as powerful coils intended to produce electromagnetism, carrying the current in loops. I already mentioned that the toroidal field, in its relation to the tokamak, in that it is a donut shaped energy field. Columns have those. So they could be found at the bottom of nearly every column. You can see that in the bottom picture there. You can see like the donut shape going around it, the coil. Page 33. Scroll like ornaments known as volutes appear on the top of many a Corinthian pillar. Unless you never left the dirt farm, then you've seen them. They look like curling ocean waves. And you can see that on the top right there, the picture. You know exactly what I'm talking about. It's the magnetic field being represented, the negative and the positive charge of a bar magnet. Um, I should have showed a picture there. Oh, I do on the I think the next page show that the bar magnet, the magnetic the waves. The movement of the toroid and the toroidal vortex. Coils of copper wires are essential in electrifying the magnet. The columns of yesteryear had those too. They are a mixture of stone and metal. Iron rods didn't simply run along the entire length of the column shaft to reinforce the structure. And I'm talking about iron rods on the inside of the pillars. You can find them in there. Kind of think of like rebar. Iron is magnetic. Domes or roofing of copper and gold would thereby complement the geometric design of the ironclad columns, fashioned in a rotunda as a toroidal field, being strong conductors of electricity. And so you could see that there. I mean, that picture, it shows it all. It shows um, the columns going around uh, in a circle with the dome on top, with the resonator and everything. I mean, it's got everything in there. It's got the empty shell where an engine may have gone at one time. It's got everything. And there it is. There, the different types of magnetic fields. You can see the horseshoe, the bar magnets, and it seems to all be there. Uh, the toroid, the current carrying wire. You can see it going around just like the pillars. This chart helps to demonstrate the various mechanisms used to embolden the magnetic field. All features of kingdom architecture. I mean, they seem to all be represented. The bar magnet we have seen, the toroid, even the current carrying wire can be visualized among the sections of a column. But then there is one other device which I have yet to feature, the horseshoe magnet. William Sturgeon again. No, I am not making this up. Sturgeon was said to invent the horseshoe magnet in 1825. Our controllers apparently gave that guy the patent to the electromagnet and let him run with it. Well, the horseshoe has become the most widely recognized symbol for magnets. Its main advantage over other types of magnets is that the magnetic poles are close together, creating a much stronger magnetic field. And then you can see everyone's favorite there, Arch de Triomphe, or the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. The most powerful and undoubtedly the most popular horseshoe magnet to be found anywhere in our realm is the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. It is said to have been commissioned in 1806 after the victory at Austerlitz by Napoleon. What a design! And I'm not simply inferring to the horseshoe composition. The surrounding traffic circles take on the appearance of a toroidal field. And just look at how Paris spans out like a grid in all possible directions. Did Napoleon's short-lived success outline the city of Paris as well? And I've been there. I'm sure many of you have. It's whether or not this was uh, whether this was an evil tower, as some people say, or a tower, a tower intended for, or I should say, a arch intended for good purposes, um, is up for discussion. But it is truly beautiful to stand under that thing and look up at. It's unbelievable. Looking up at the ceiling from within the ark doesn't disappoint either. More sacred geometry. Who molded those intricate details and how exactly was it accomplished? We are once again reminded of the cavity resonators witnessed within the domes of countless cathedrals. These arcs serve purposes, and I am not convinced they were merely to funnel troops through in the annual nationalist parade. Another way of saying that is that, the occult has esoteric explanations for all their evil practices, but they don't necessarily hold a monopoly on everything. There are mysteries of heaven, and they may corrupt the mysteries of heaven, but that doesn't make the mystery of heaven theirs exclusively. The Narva Triumphal Arch in St. Petersburg is said to have been built in 1814 as a retaliatory response to the Arc de Triomphe to commemorate the Russian victory over Napoleon. So basically, Napoleon raised his in Paris, and Russia's like, "How dare you?" And so after the War of 1812, after they ran Napoleon back home, they raised this one up here. We are told it was never originally built to last. It was built apparently of wood. It is built using sheets of copper on the outside. However, how very strange then, seeing as how copper is such a strong conductor of electricity. The Arcade du I can't even pronounce this. The Arcade du whatever, I'm not gonna pronounce it. I'm not gonna butcher that. In Brussels, so if you ever go to Brussels, you'll see that. And I have been to Brussels, I haven't been to that arch. Was said to have been commissioned by King Leopold II for the 1880 National Exhibition. So there we have another one of these worldwide fair exhibitions that were going on. What makes this one unique is that in addition to the ornamentations of copper and gold, a rotunda of columns jettisons out from either side of the triune arches. Never mind the narrative misdirection. Its architects were maximizing the electromagnetic energy on this baby. Such a shame if it truly was built in 1880 then, as nobody would have put it to any use whatsoever. The thing about horseshoe architecture is that they are not simply to be found hiding behind the mask of victory arches. No, they can be discovered in the span of bridges as well as in cathedrals. Look at the curves on that lovely lady. Surely a bridge lover such as yourself will agree. I could plop down on a patch of grass and watch that bridge for hours. Just watch the shadows move. You will tell me this is a bridge and that sometimes bridges are simply bridges and not power stations. It is the Ponte Sant'Angelo in Rome, but perhaps you are right. But then you will have to admit the architecture went a little overboard with this one. I mean, I can appreciate a little added support because sometimes sagging comes with age, but really, it's practically written on the walls this time around. Horseshoes galore. We are gazing upon the Pont du Gard in southern France, if you didn't know that already. We are told the Romans built it as an aqueduct in the first century to carry an estimated 8 to 9 million gallons of water per day over 50 kilometers to the fountains, baths, and homes of Nimes. Undoubtedly a marvel of engineering as it stands. All I'm saying is, with all those magnetic attractors or ferromagnetic attractors, It is quite plausible that the aqueduct did far more than carry water. We're talking about living water. I'm willing to bet most, if not all, of the arches across our realm towered over avenues of water at one time. So I'm throwing it out there that these arches that there would have been very possibly streams of water under the arches or around them. Like think of the one in France, the Arc de Triomphe, and there's that big traffic circle there. What if that was at one time water? Water is just as important to the narrative as the firmaments and the ether. The entire second day of creation was pressed upon making that fact known. It is likely only our controllers who filled the walkways of dirt and then, after another long day of destroying kingdom architecture, paraded their soldiers through them. Or, in the words of Joni Mitchell, so they paid paradise and put up a parking lot and don't expect me to sing that. And, maybe in future papers, I'll one of the things I wanna cover on here is, like, the feature of the city of Milan and how it's really trippy how you can see old photos from the 1800s of just canals, of just streets of water, and you see the same locations now, it's all paved over. So, these cities had, uh, far more canals, and I would like to try to perhaps look into Paris being a city that had a lot of water canals at one time, they paved over them. All right, page 39. At an earlier moment, I showed you the sounds of silence as they pertain to the semantics of sacred spaces. But in reality, the kings and priests of the kingdom knew how to lob a sound grenade into a cathedral with the mighty pipe organ. Have you ever sat and listened to one of those bad boys? They were harmony bombs. Each song would have been tuned and played at the sacred healing tone of 528 hertz, not the 440 hertz garbage which they play in music nowadays. Divided by 12 leaves us with 36.666. Quick post mud flood history lesson. In 1885, the Music Commission of the Italian government declared that all instruments and orchestras should use a tuning fork that vibrated at 440 hertz rather than the standard of 435, which preceded it. In 1917, the American Federation of Musicians followed suit with an even heftier push for 440 hertz in the 1940s. By 1953, a worldwide standard was agreed upon and signed. From that moment on, 440 hertz not only became the definitive guideline for how the middle A on the piano was tuned, but the frequency for all instruments on the chromatic scale. Page 40. Pipe organs would have reached the healing nations while words of praise were lifted towards Yahusha, their king, and Yahuwah, the Most High Elohim in heaven. As we can see in these photos, they are often nestled in close proportion to the rose windows and baptistries, reminding us that every separate element of these cathedrals was intended to harmonize in a symbiotic relationship. My favorite, one of my favorite songs is one that was, written by Saint Saëns, and he was an organist in Paris in the 1800s, but, I don't know if he would just, you know, just like the rest of the inheritors, if he was just taking a song from the Middle Kingdom. I mean, it might as well be. It's one of the most beautiful, it's all on the organ, and it's like I can't I can only imagine being in those cathedrals and being blown out of my chair when that baby was played. It's just unbelievably beautiful. Have you seen the pipe organ they've got set up at the Biltmore Estate in North Carolina? That's near to my house. I need to go there. It's in the dining room. We are told somebody was commissioned to play it from dawn until bedtime, so long as the Biltmore was in residence. You figure that made it difficult to hold a conversation over supper, but depending upon the average subject matter these days, I probably wouldn't complain. The pipe organ at the Vanderbilt mansion took it to the next level as it was positioned over a hearth of all places. I stress was because they tell us the mansion was constructed in 1883, but then demolished in 1926. Who builds a mansion for the short span of 40 years? The attention to detail in this photo alone would have us believing it was designed with love. I will ask you to take a closer look at the fireplace. Is it a fireplace, though? It's far too shallow. Rather difficult to tell in this photo, but the back of the chamber was lined with a middle plate adorned with art rather than brick. I'm wondering if they, um, I'm wondering if they all did at one time, being adorned with the metal in the back and artwork. These two Anderons, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, couldn't have held logs. Those are the decorative pieces you see in there. These well, anyways, these two Anderons could not have possibly held logs. They have the appearance of the symmetrical spikes, which can still be observed on the rooftops of countless buildings and cathedrals, and were probably employed as etheric transmitters. Next page. Every so often, we can find a perfectly preserved hearth, having never succumbed to fire damage. Fire virgins, I shouldn't wonder. These three locations originate in France, from what I can tell. Notice the wide, narrow hearths in proportion to the ornamental, I guess, anderons within. Two of them are lions, reminding us of Yehuda. One thing seems certain: they were never intended to host logs for burning. They couldn't even hold logs if you look at them. There's no way. The place is either white or glazed with gold. You'd have to be a crazy madman to char those walls. No, not even the snooty French kings with powdered noses and wigs and a little too flamboyant of fingers would have wanted to light a match in that thing. And look at how far away the lounging furniture is positioned. There is no possible way a manageable fire would heat a room like that, much less the entire palace. Because these so called fireplaces were never designed for burning anything. All indications point us to the likelihood that the original hearths were designed as access points to the ether within each room. Some say they are temperature regulators, but I don't even think the kings and priests would required heat. A common characteristic trait of Tudor housing is their oddly shaped and far too thin for practicality chimneys. In every picture provided, as well as what I can find, they're charred from improper usage outside as well as within. What were the inheritors doing? Smoking a ham? Every chimney takes on a different pattern. Some are curved or twisted, others take on a checkerboard pattern of different colored bricks. The masonry is stunning. And indeed, Tudor architecture as a whole is far more ornately decorated than we might come to expect of such small minded people, narrowly escaping the plague. On closer inspection, what do you see? The same symmetrical spikes which can be found on cathedrals and other kingdom buildings serve as rooftop cake toppers right alongside of the chimneys. Only here they contrast the chimney narrative. All decorative, I'm sure. Something far more than meets the eye is going on. I wouldn't be the slightest surprised to learn that metallic antennae have been removed from them by our controllers. FYI, domestic chimneys such as these made their appearance in private dwellings during the Dark Ages. I should say, by appearance, that they say that these chimneys they were invented during the Dark Ages. So they were invented during what we would call, the Millennial Kingdom, telling us that something else is going on with them. The narrative swap between kingdom architects and our controllers who inherited their designs likely helps to explain a great deal of the many cities which burned to the ground in the 1800s, really. Obviously, destruction events were planned so as to assign his story for the rubble heap. But let's just assume for the moment that something so simple as energy harvesting mechanisms connecting a room of the house with the ether might be misunderstood and misinterpreted for a hand and warmer. Well, here are just some of the fires which burned down the old world during the 1800s. Probably nothing to see here, I'm sure. So we see 1805, Detroit, Michigan, burned. 1807, Copenhagen, over 1,000 buildings in the city, including the Church of Our Lady, burned. 1811, Great Fire of Podil in Kiev, Russian Empire, over 2,000 buildings, 12 churches and 3 abbeys destroyed. 1812, Moscow burned. 1813, Buffalo, New York burned. 1813, York, Upper Canada burned. 1814, the popular War of 1812, Washington, D.C. burned. 1813, Portsmouth, New Hampshire burned. 1814, Bavaria, was it Churchenruth, Bavaria, completely destroyed. 1817, St. John's, Newfoundland, burned. 1820, Savannah, Georgia, 500 structures destroyed. 1821, Paramaribo, Suriname, 400 houses destroyed. 1821, Fayetteville, 500 buildings destroyed. 1827, Turku, Finland, burned. 1829, Augusta, Georgia, hundreds of buildings destroyed. 1831, Fayetteville, North Carolina, the city was nearly leveled. 1835, New York City, burned. 1838, Charleston, South Carolina, over 1,000 buildings damaged. That's news to me. I knew that there was a 1861 burning of Chicago. I had no idea that it had already been burned down in 1838, much of it. 1842, Hamburg burned. 1845, New York City, 345 buildings destroyed. That's a lot, even for New York City. 1845, Pittsburgh, 1,000 buildings destroyed. 1845, La Playa, the city port of Ponce, Puerto Rico, destroyed. 1846, St. John's, Newfoundland, 2,000 buildings destroyed. 1847, uh, was it Bucharest, Romania, burned. 1848, Medina, Ohio, destroyed. 1849, St. Louis, burned. 1849, Toronto, burned. 1850, Krakow, Poland, 10% of city destroyed. 1851, San Francisco, 2,000 buildings destroyed. 1852, Vaasa, Finland, burned. 1852, Montreal, burned. 1854, only halfway through the century. We'll get there. 1854, Newcastle and Gateshead, England, burned. 1858, Auckland, New Zealand, burned. 1862, Troy, New York, 671 buildings destroyed. 1864, Brisbane and Queensland, Australia, burned. 1861 through 1865, the American Civil War. Need I explain? There it is, 1861, Charleston, my own city, South Carolina, burned. That they like I think a third of the city burned down. After already been probably half of it burning down the first time. 1864, Atlanta, Georgia, burned, destroyed, Sherman. 1865, Columbia, South Carolina, Sherman again. 1865, Richmond, Virginia, burned by retreating Confederates this time. 1866, Portland, Maine, burned. 1868, I can't even pronounce that, but it's in Bavaria, burned. 1869, Kent, England, burned. 1870, Medina, Ohio, destroyed. 1871, several simultaneous fires in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Illinois on October 8th through 9th. It's a little suspicious what's happening there. 18, as if they're not all suspicious, but 1871, Chicago burned again. 1871, Peshtigo, deadliest fire in American history. That's all I know about it. I don't know how deadly it is, but apparently it's the deadliest. 1871, Michigan, more simultaneous fires. 1871, Urbana, Illinois, burned. 1872, Boston, 776 buildings destroyed. 1874, Chicago, again, 812 structures destroyed. 1877, Paris, Texas, destroyed. 1877, St. John, New Brunswick, 1,600 buildings destroyed. 1878, Hong Kong, 350 to 400 buildings destroyed. 1879, Japan, burned in Hokkaido. 1883, Kuala Terengganu, 1,600 buildings as well as the Royal Palace destroyed. 1886, Calgary, Alberta, burned. 1886, Vancouver, British Columbia, burned. Shout out if I name your city. 1888, Sundsvall, Sweden, burned. 1889, Seattle, Washington, burned. 1889, Spokane, Washington, burned. 1889, Ellensburg, Washington, burned. Wow, a lot of Washington is burning in 1889. See, isn't that I like you actually see trends in here like a bunch in Georgia in one year. It's like how a little convenient is that? A little suspicious. 1889, Bakersfield, California, 196 buildings destroyed. That had me surprised because by the time you get to the 1930s, think of Steinbeck, like Bakersfield is like a tent city. I had no idea that there was a city that could be burned there in the 1880s. I had no idea. 1889, Lynn, Massachusetts, 100 buildings destroyed. 1892, St. John's, Newfoundland, again burned. 1893, Clarksville, Virginia, burned. 1894, Hinckley, Minnesota, several towns destroyed, as if that's not suspicious. 1894, Shanghai, 1,000 buildings destroyed. 1896, Paris, Texas, burned, destroyed. 1897, Windsor, Nova Scotia, Canada, burned, destroyed. 1898, New Westminster, British Columbia, burned. 1898, Park City, Utah, burned. All right. That was I need to take a drink after that. All right. Now look at these pictures carefully. We are on page 48 if you need caught up. And now it is time to play a little game I like to call Red Rover, Red Rover, will the Millennium Kingdom Cathedral come right over? That is just one title I've come up with. There are others. The point of the game, though, is that you are supposed to attune your head knowledge in such a way as to spot the commonalities between all cathedrals featured based on what we have gone over tonight. I'll give you the first clue. From left to right in clockwise order, the names of these cathedrals are as follows: Bristol Cathedral, Wells Cathedral in Somerset, York Cathedral, and Winchester Cathedral. The clue I am hinting at is that they are all four derived from merry old England, ground zero for the Millennial Kingdom. But then look at the other commonalities. Every cathedral shown is given two towers. There is always a front entrance, obviously, but then we can typically observe a rose window or some sort of symmetrical design directly above it. To the left and the right of the front entrance are two separate doors, usually smaller in stature. The spikes and the spires are a given. Moving on to another corner of this flat, motionless realm, we come upon these two cathedrals in China. What is especially confusing is that both are given the same name, the Sacred Heart Cathedral. One can be found in uh, Guan, Guangzhou, and the other Hongzhou. I'm sorry, I don't speak Chinese. I try. I want to be respect. I can't pronounce that. You guys can see right there, Hongzhou. So the next time you go asking for directions in China, which I'm screwed because I can't even speak the language to pronounce it, you will have to be specific. Perhaps our controllers simply confuse the two, seeing how they're so similar. They might as well be siblings, fraternal twins even. And what do you see? Two towers, three sets of doors, rows windows, spikes and spires. None of it is functioning as once intended. I guess it was always, cake decorators. The National Val Basilica, as well as Las Lajas Cathedral, can be found in Ecuador and Colombia, South America, respectively. And what do you see? Three sets of doors, rose windows, two towers, spikes everywhere. Well, Las Lajas only has one tower, complete with a spire. That may have something to do with its smaller size. Some cathedrals you'll see with multiple, a whole bunch of them. But there are many cathedrals across our realm with only one steeple. It doesn't make it any less of a cathedral. They were either designed to function as places of worship and ether harvesting power stations, or later designed by our controllers at a much later date to look like the cathedrals of old for ornamental purposes, but only to throw us off the scent and not ask any questions. It is difficult nabbing a photo of St. Joseph Cathedral on the left, the top left right there, due to the congested streets of Zanzibar. We are now in Africa. From this angle, however, it seems pretty straightforward that the same features are offered. The obvious addition are those two steeples on top of its towers. They look dreadfully out of place and unmatched in beauty, which reminds me, most of the construction photos that we can find happen to involve the building of those spires on the top of towers. There is undoubtedly a great deal of remodeling that went on in the 1800s to disfigure these beauties and render them infertile. Those two steeples do not belong. Even the Acropolum of Carthage in Tunisia has misplaced the spikes on top of its two towers. That's the one on the top right there. An older painting plays witness to their once known whereabouts. Looks like its inheritors paved a parking lot around the entire cathedral, as cars are invited to straddle the steps now. That's precisely the sort of thing inheritors would do. No respect. Something else I see is a dome in the back. Its antenna spike is still accounted for. A dome has yet to be featured in this comparison game, but there are plenty of them for sure. What the Carthage Cathedral managed to do is blend the East meets West design, and that's something that really needs to be discussed in this. That I'm not convinced that the dome buildings were the evil people and that the cathedrals were the good people. It's really like an East meets West design. Then you go over to China and Japan and you see again the same features, the towers, the spires, same things, but the pagodas and stuff, they look very different. And I'll get to those hopefully in future weeks. Cathedral Betafo on the bottom can be found in Madagascar. Those two domes on top of her tower seem out of place. I'm willing to bet they were added. There is redemption, though. Do you see those urn like slots on either side of the larger entry doors? In some instances, our controllers filled them with idols, but not here. Oh, there are idols to be found upon the Madagascar Cathedral, though. I spy two of them, one of which has replaced the central spike. Ridiculous. As if the kings and priests of the Millennial Kingdom were using the Virgin Mary to harness electricity. Plop there for misdirection purposes, undoubtedly. All right, now this is gonna be the last section of tonight. And what I want to do is, as you guys know, I have like dozens of papers, and I'm designing them in such a way to go back and just add to them. Just grab different ones and add to. And so when I go back into this one, I want to feature specific different cathedrals and show the just the uniqueness of them. And this isn't a cathedral; it's a palace. But I think you're going to find this really interesting. And I feel like I've finally come around full circle on this because I have been struggling with Chateau de Chambord ever since I went there. I went and visited this one in person. Chateau, Chateau de. I can't. If someone put a gun to my head, even when I was in France, I could not pronounce French to save my life. It's one of the most beautiful languages on earth, no doubt. I unfortunately, if it were up to me to speak French, it would not be voted the most beautiful language on earth. I will tell you that right now. Chateau de Chambord and the double helix stairway to heaven. Some of you can already cue the song in your head. Sometimes we hear someone say something and we almost fall out of our chair. This was sort of like that. Only it wasn't a chair that I almost fell out of, but a staircase. Two of them. The staircase duo in question can be found at Chateau de Chambord in the Loire Valley of France. They are fused as one without ever meeting or becoming tangled. And I'll show a picture of it in a little bit. Astonishingly, they make up a spiraling double helix. I told you we would probably get around to this magnificent architectural offering again. Well, here we are. And so, if hearing of the double helix doesn't cause you to twitch your head slightly sideways, then I probably need to pause right here and explain something. The coiling double helix was not officially discovered as our DNA molecule until geneticist James Watson and molecular biologist Francis Crick came along in 1953 and made the announcement. Construction started on Chateau de Chambord in 1519, 400 years earlier. How many tourists do you suspect visit the chateau in any given year? Tens of thousands, maybe, actually, probably hundreds of thousands. Cognitive dissonance is a headache. Even more astonishing, then, is the fact that nobody offered me a handful of pills and a water cup for the 15 euros ticket price. Just so we're clear, Watson and Crick didn't discover anything. I'm not the only one stating this, though. Even the U.S. National Library of Medicine agrees. Neither Watson nor Crick conducted any DNA experiments of their own. That's according to the U.S. National Library of Medicine. And yet in 1953, they discovered the DNA molecule known as the double helix by, quote, drawing upon the experimental results of others, unquote. What does that mean? And relying on, quote, brilliant intuition, wink, wink, persistence, wink, wink, and luck, wink, wink, unquote. Right. The U.S. National Library of Medicine has it backwards and is indeed mocking us when stating the double helix has not only reshaped biology, it has become a cultural icon represented in sculpture, visual art, jewelry, and toys. Oh dear. I put that sarcasm there because it was represented in sculpture, visual art, jewelry, and toys. I don't know about toys, but long before they discovered it. Leave it to our controllers to repackage what was already well known among the architects of the Millennial Kingdom and then call it a textbook discovery. As the story goes, Francis Crick burst through the front door of his Cambridge home, spouting barely legible gibberish to his wife about two spirals twisting in opposite directions from one another. Being somewhat of an artist herself, Odile Creek, that's his wife, put vision to paper. And like Walt Disney with Mickey Mouse, the coiling double helix was promptly born on her drawing board, mind you, not in yeah. To celebrate, the couple met up with research partner James Watson. So apparently he wasn't even there to put it on the drawing board. And the trio drunk themselves silly at a local pub. It should be noted that Crick was a devoted groupie of author Aldous Huxley. Dun dun dun. He famously threw nude parties throughout the 1950s and 60s, and that's a topic of a whole nother paper I could go down. But most importantly of all, Crick was a devoted connoisseur of LSD. That's likely not a coincidence. I do believe LSD has a part to play when it comes to our controllers understanding what they've inherited. And I actually want to talk about that in future weeks. I do have old writings on that. I want to update them and how the gods, the Elohim, use LSD and some of these other hallucinogens um, to basically commune with them and give this kind of information. It's actually really fascinating the things that they were discovering with LSD in the 50s and 60s through scientific experiments. And the double helix was a huge part of it. Because let's be honest, what Francis Crick essentially discovered is the uh, caduceus, the very staff carried by Hermes, the Greek Elohim of language, occult philosophy, alchemy, and Western magic. The same caduceus can be observed on ambulances and medical buildings across the world, though we didn't only look there, as is a it. Oh, or I should say, it is a also a symbol of the Kundalini, the two spiral currents of energy that are likened to a serpent as they spark and spike up, down, and around the central channel of the spinal column in tantric yoga. The twin serpents of the double helix even seem to slither frequently throughout the annals of science, from the subatomic scale to the motions of celestial mechanics and even the coils of entire galaxies. LOL. I showed you that picture there of the double helix in space. I actually remembered when they discovered that. There's simply no escaping the phallic serpents of old. Crick's double helix discovery ventures even further back than the Olympian, though. You figure the snake worshipping Chaldeans deserve some credit. Um, let's see if I could pronounce the name of this Elohim correctly. Ning Ishzida is the twin double helix snake depicted in the vase above. A Mesopotamian deity, it seems as though he was originally a tree Elohim, which I find fascinating, reminding us of the serpent in the garden. And in fact, the very name means in Sumerian, Lord of the sacred giving tree. And that should remind us of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Eventually, he became associated with fertility, the underworld, and the healing force of nature. Uh, think about the Greeks they would have you sleep with snakes at night. And in fact, many cultures they would have temples devoted to this. You would go sleep with the snakes at night. And they would supposedly heal you. Common attributes for serpent worship across the ancient realm. A.O. Frothingham wrote the following in 1917. The proto Hermes was always a snake god, and before the era of complete anthropomorphism, he was thought of in snake form. And so, um, think of it like what he means by anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism was almost completely invented in the 1800s post mud flood. If you need a good example of this, we plop our children down just on Sesame Street to have animals, Muppets, teach us what it is to be created in the image of Elohim. I mean, just stop and think about that for a second. Like, why do we need talking animals to teach us what it is to be human? But there's something very strange about that. But it is an essential element of his function that he was not a single snake, for the great single earth snake was the mother goddess, but the double snake, male and female, the most prolific form of copulation in the animal kingdom. And since I'm on the subject of talking animals, if you were to go back to any of the ancients, because the idea of a serpent speaking to Eve is to any Babylonian that would scream magic. There's magic happening. So just again, think about that with like the animals speaking to our children. Anyways, he's describing the double helix, building block of the male and female. I checked. It seems as though every continent has had a role to play in ancient serpent worship. I could go on and on, dropping quotes, all essentially saying the same thing, but why go to all the trouble? Hopefully, a few prime examples will leave you satisfied. Take the Aztecs, for example. Author Claude Levi Strauss writes in Aztec, the word, I guess it looks like cult with an L, kotal, means both serpent and twin. And then the name Quetzalcoatl can thus be interpreted either as plume serpent or magnificent twin. So the Aztecs fall in line with the creative civilization then, and it only makes sense that they would. Throughout the shamanic religions from Australia to Tibet and Eastern Asia, up the Nile and into the very heart of Africa, not forgetting the indigenous of North and South America, there are visions of spiral ladders or braided ropes to be found there, and which seem to unify all religious experiences. So consider. This comes from Shamanism, Archaic Techniques of Ecstasy. And it says the symbolism of the rope, like that of the ladder, necessarily implies communication between sky and earth. It is by means of a rope or a ladder, as to by a vine, a bridge, a chain, etc., that the gods descended to earth and men go up to the sky. Does the latter concept sound familiar? I should hope so from one gentleman biblical scholar to another. I have included an illustration of Yaakov's ladder, but I'm starting to think its artist, William Blake, only got it half right. Looks a little too narrow for all that traffic. There should be one spiraling ladder going down and another leading pedestrians up. Before anyone says I am confusing the holy with the profane, I will remind you of a slight inconvenience. You will need to turn the page to see what I mean. The very structure of our DNA molecule is a double helix. I guess our bodies must be pagan then. You were right to feel guilt, I guess. Let's consider the implications. Perhaps we have become the seed of the serpent in the short season. Too much and too soon? Well, that is one explanation. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm simply giving you some options. Maybe finding another would be good. Oh, here's one. Why must the occult hold a monopoly on the most expensive pieces of property on the monopoly board? Understanding that the Watchers delivered the mysteries of heaven to humanity is crucial in all of this. They were worthless mysteries because the Watchers were not interested in teaching the Torah to the nations. Still mysteries of heaven, though. Then again, there are cautiously few, if any, real photos of the double helix to prove their existence. And isn't that suspicious? A little too suspect, if you ask me. All we are given are CG images. Our entire reality is a series of cartoons. Look, I'm not saying the double helix isn't legit, but can you blame me for being the skeptical sort? That's cute that your cousin Veronica saw the double helix under a microscope that one time in third period biology, but did she take a picture to prove it? I thought not. Getting back to my second double helix option, that the occult needn't hold the monopoly on every mystery of heaven. It seems as though the pyramids of Egypt may indeed have played a part in Crick's discovery. Did Pharaoh not wear a cobra on his crown as a symbol of the divine word and third eye, the pineal gland, by which true hidden knowledge might be discovered? He did. Another worthless mystery of heaven, I shouldn't wonder. I'm digging myself into a ditch, aren't I? Oh dear. Well, let's try this again. If you read my paper on the stone of scone, and we went over this a few weeks ago in this group, and I suggest you do, then you will recall my personal conclusion that the pyramids of Giza were built by Seth, but then finished by Shem. They not only predated anything we might find in Babylon, they're older than Noah's flood. Here's something I didn't tell you at the time. Many suspect the capstone of the Great Pyramid was once a clear crystal or glass that produced a visible beacon of light from its apex. In his book, The Secret in the Bible, author Tony Bushby explains why. He says, whenever a light is shown down into a glass pyramid in exact scale or proportion as the Great Pyramid, a rainbow serpent is created. The light provides a type of force or energy that in turn creates the vertical spiral of light, a serpent upraised, invisible in rock, but visible in a clear substance. That is what the ancient Egyptian priesthood meant when they said a serpent lies coiled in the Great Pyramid. The Egyptian priesthood may have referenced the rainbow serpent, and in fact, they may have worshipped the serpent as a point of religion, but the sons of Seth undoubtedly had something entirely else in mind. If the builders of Chateau de Chambord are the people whom I suspect them to be, then perhaps they left us some clues. Here is what we are told about Chambord, and here's the illustration and also a picture of the staircase. The chateau was designed to represent New Yerushalayim, with its four corners reminding us of the four corners of the earth. The staircase can be found in the very center of the castle. As one ascends the coiling double helix through each floor, visitors finally reach the arched dome in the sky, and it literally resembles the firmament, by which they can then enter the heavens above. It is Yaakov's ladder. Some will claim the Tower of Babel is being reenacted, and in fact, I overheard one of those bus tour guides with the big foam finger claim it to be so, but I am not so sure about that. I don't recall Chateau de Chambord being a ziggurat. And come to think of it, what is the heart of New Jerusalem exactly but the tree of life? And this is what we read in Revelation 22. And he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of Elohim and of the Lamb. In the midst of the street of it, and on either side of the river, was there the tree of life, which bore 12 manners of fruits and yielded her fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. I never paid attention to this until just now. The tree of life stems from two separate roots on either side of the river, but is accredited as being one singular life form. Does it spiral, I wonder? Is it a coiled double helix? And now here you can see a picture from the backside to kind of see more of what I'm talking about, New Jerusalem, the four corners of the earth. The entire structure is massive, containing 440 rooms, 282 fireplaces, and 84 staircases, and remains an architectural metaphor for the eternal cycle of life in the universe. And those 440 rooms, as you can see, would have had much more rooms if they had completed it. The builders of this beauty were telling us something. But as you can see, it was never completed. Construction came to a grinding halt in 1547, with only two cardinal directions of the Earth being finished. And why is that? We are told it was commissioned to be built by Francis I, and that work eventually ceased upon his death. You may recall the most humorous part of all, it was designed as a hunting lodge. Are they being serious? The official narrative apparently can't make sense of any of this because look at what else the Wikipedia has to say about it. It says the chateau was never intended to provide any form of defense from enemies. Consequently, the walls, towers, and partial moat are decorative, and even at the time were an anachronism. Some elements of architecture, open windows, loggias, and a vast outdoor area at the top, borrowed from the Italian Renaissance architecture, are less practical in cold and damp northern France. So Francis I put all that money into a hunting lodge fashioned after New Jerusalem, never thinking a situation might arise where the prey might become his predator. You never really know. It gets worse though. Everything about Chambord is decorative. Its walls, towers, and moat, all decorative. Did I read that right? Far worse than its useless ornamentations, apparently, are the open windows and vast outdoor areas on the rooftop, which are deemed far too cold and impractical for France. What were the mortals who built this thing thinking? There are 11 kinds of towers and three different types of chimneys on the rooftop alone, but I'm sure even they are the blueprint ramblings of madmen. We are furthermore told Chambord would remain unpopulated despite its hundreds of rooms. Go figure. I have my own theory on why construction came to a standstill. Are you ready for it? The Millennial Kingdom of Messiah came to an end. Our controllers were able to repurpose many buildings, but this was apparently not one of them. Okay, I survived that read. That's it for tonight, and hopefully you guys are all still with me. And hopefully you guys enjoyed that. There's some old information there, some new information, and this will be something that I'll be adding to. I'll give you guys a little quick story here. Um, you know, I was planning, so I had, let's see, one more day to work on this. Wednesday was a no go because that was the Day of Atonement. Didn't work on it. Took the day off, high Sabbath. Woke up the next morning and my one of my 8-year-old sons was screaming in pain, and his like neck and his head was glued to his shoulder. I'm laughing. It's I'm kind of I kind of had the attitude of the villain from Rocky Four. If he dies, he dies. But my wife was more sympathetic, and apparently he slept on it wrong. So I had to take him to the chiropractor, and I was like, well, there goes any further writing on this paper. So I got done when I got done, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the presentation. And oh yeah, so I wanted to cover more. I'll cover them in the future. We'll go over it in the future. I wanted to cover lighthouses. I wanted to talk about the Gardens of Versailles, which I personally was able to tour and look at, and many other elements of sacred geometry and the design. So, what are you guys' thoughts? I'm opening up the floor. And that right there would be the sound of silence.
Yeah, no, it was so good. Thank you for your presentation. And it's just wonderful to see these ancient architecture and to put some of the pieces together. And right now I'm sitting at Lake Powell, which looks like the melted city of long ago. And as I was reading in Ecclesiasticus this year or yesterday, that he does this and he left behind these things so that we would be humbled by them. And I thought that was just so profound as we see melted things and beautiful things that we're just supposed to be in awe of it and be humbled and obey his commands is what it all comes back down to. So thank you for your presentation.
Well, I have to admit, while that was riveting, all of it, amazing, and I love the photos, I did rabbit trail a little bit after Paris because I was like, what is the water situation in Paris? And so I did tune out briefly as I was reading about the highly sophisticated sewer system with two different um, water sources for that are completely separate from each other. One for drinking or whatever, and one for sewage and for washing the streets. They have a mechanism to like put in a key and shoot water out of the streets just to clear debris and stuff. And it was obviously put in by Napoleon, of course it was. But I wondered about that whole sophisticated system being part of the electrical system, like you mentioned.
Yeah, the now the city of Paris, and I'm talking about the historical medieval city of Paris, is actually divided. In there's like 2/3 on one side of the river, the Seine River, and then like another third on the other. And if everyone can picture Notre Dame, it's actually an island in the middle. It's really it's fabulous. And so Notre Dame is like the pinnacle, the center part of it, as a grand cathedral there. And it looks very much, if you can look at when I present the star forts as well as the star cities. I don't know when this can be ready. I have one version online on the website you can look at right now, but I have in there a map of medieval Paris, and it looks very much like a star fort, and a bit of the sacred geometry going on. So I think that there was a lot more going on with the city grids and the water systems there. Some people have suggested that it was a city like Venice at one time. I can't prove that. I'd have to really look more at that. But the fact is that a lot of these cities were built like Venice. And Venice, it probably still is like that city because it's on the water, on the ocean. But Milan is another. That was, like I pointed out earlier tonight. There are photos. I'll eventually get around to showing those, where you can see the old photos from the 1800s, and there are streets of just canals of water, and they just filled them in with dirt and pavement and concrete, and just covered it up. Oh,
Do you have a theory that of why they burned some buildings, not others? Why they chose certain ones? And when you look around the world, it seems like a lot of these dome ones were kept, these really big, huge structures. And do you have any theories on that?
okay. So yeah, you bring up a really good point. All right. So, and I don't know. I don't have a theory on this yet. Here's what I can tell you, and what has just been said. You go over to the UK, and you go to England, merry old England. There's beautiful cathedrals there. Some of them have been destroyed, but there are beautiful cathedrals there. Then you go up to Scotland, and the castles and the cathedrals, they've all been destroyed. And they tell you in official history, it's the William Wallace Braveheart thing, that the British are going up there, those jerks, and they're destroying them. And on a Tartarian narrative, one of the big things being put forward now, and it's a very fascinating idea, is that the cathedrals alone were the original Millennial Kingdom structures, and that towards the end of the Millennial Kingdom, or just afterwards, was the Renaissance. So think of this, the 1600s, 1700s, and this would have been a time of enlightenment, of rebellion against the Torah, against the laws of the king, the whole kingdom. And they were still having the same technology, but they were building completely different structures. And so they would have been destroying the cathedrals, or definitely, they were definitely doing that. There's no doubt in my mind they were doing that, and also altering and changing them radically. Filling them with idols and all sorts of stuff. Putting the gargoyles on there, all those extra things that weren't there originally. And so I'm considering that. I think that's something worth looking into, but I'm not going to commit to that view because there's just too much moving pieces to look at. And the reality is that when you go to England and Western Europe, it's very Gothic cathedral centric. And that's another, I think, important element to this, is the idea Gothic. They named these cathedrals Goth or Gothic as an insult. It was, barbarian, dark. It was for brutish people would build something like that. Though I am convinced more than ever that New Jerusalem is going to be Gothic looking, like a cathedral. But when you go, further east into Europe, that narrative becomes a little bit more shaky. Yeah, you do see some the Gothic cathedrals there, but you see tons of, you go down into Greece and to Turkey and up into Russia and all through there, you see big dome structures. And that's why I also said you go to China and Cambodia and all through Asia and stuff, you see the, um, very, very different structures as well, but they all have like the pagodas and such, but they all have similarities. In the same way, you could look at mammals, they have similarities, and reptiles, they have similarities, right? People across this earth have, different skin, different looks, different heights, but they all have similarities. These buildings all have similarities. So I don't, I could say something like, well, what if the Gothic cathedrals belong to a certain tribe, like the Levites? I don't know. I don't know. What if there were different designs for different, depending on what tribe you came from? I have no clue. I wasn't there. So those are all things worth considering, and that's why for now I just feel it's best just to put out there what we're seeing, and let people come to their own conclusions. Hopefully that answer. Oh, also it was asked here what a star fort is, also known as a bastion fort, and we see those throughout Europe. The picture that uh, Andrew put here, I'm trying to remember what country that comes from. It's actually in my report, but basically they tell us that they were designed as part of the Reformation, not the Reformation. I always throw this backwards. The Renaissance. And that I think Michelangelo was the original designer. I mean, they just give that guy credit for everything. He apparently designed the Bastion star forts as military defenses against gunpowder and cannonballs. And so we see them also all throughout the eastern seaboard of America. There are in Florida, there's 4 of them that I know of. There's one in St. Augustine, Florida, which is a Spanish fort. There's the one in Key West, which they tell us was built during the American Civil War, ridiculous narrative. And then there's the 2 in Pensacola. And then, the Statue of Liberty is on a star fort. There, the fort where I think that the Star Spangled Banner was based on, I think that's a star fort. So I have my theories on that, and I'll talk about it a little later on. But as you can see, they're all based on sacred geometry, like frozen water. And they're all around water. That plays important too. You see moats. This picture right here is fascinating because I think they all look like I think that there was like a city in the middle. It wasn't a military fortress. I think that there would have been either a quad in the middle or a castle in the middle. And it also played with the frequency and sacred space, all that kind of stuff. It all had a purpose, and I don't believe that they were designed for war. And one of the things I'll be talking about with that is when you look at how water molecules change based on the words. And we've seen these same experiments with plants. If you were to go talk to a plant and say, you're so adorable, you're beautiful, I love you, the plant flourishes and it grows. But if you go up and go, you're hideously ugly, I hate you, why won't you die? The plant shrivels up. It's absolutely incredible how the world materializes around us based on our sins and our transgressions, and either love or hate, right? Or love and fear. And those are the 2 prime emotions, love and fear. So what emotion conveys war? Love or fear? It's not love. And so it's interesting that all the star forts take on the sacred geometry of love. So going back to the water molecules, the experiments will show that if you play beautiful music and say loving things, like I love you, or eternity, or heaven and things like that, it forms these beautiful shapes. But then if you play like heavy metal music, or you just thrashing stuff, and it looks very ugly. And none of these star forts look like that. They don't convey fear and war. So that I kind of throw that all in there.
So do you think that most of the burning and everything had taken place with all these burning cities that you had spoken about in all these areas? Did you find any other, my first question is, did you find any other ones like of burnings around the world, or did you just kind of focus on like North America? And secondly, do you think that they were picking particular buildings, or they were just trying to just burn it all down?
So I just focused on North America for that. That was the only continent. I didn't focus on Europe or anywhere. Oh, I did actually cover a couple in Asia. I think did like Shanghai and a couple of them, but they're almost exclusively. There were a few Europe, but it was mostly North American that time. Interestingly enough, that was burning down. Um, and you see Russia that burned, Moscow that burned down in was it 1812? And I think that with America there was more destruction, and the theory is that they needed to convey the idea that this was the new world, and you couldn't have these ancient buildings there. Now there's buildings in America that look very, very old, and I they so we can get into it, like with the Capitol buildings and stuff, the big dome buildings with the pillars and such. The questions being asked is how were those built by cowboys on horseback, right? Where were they bringing the supplies, that kind of stuff? And I understand they could bring supplies in by train, but it's like really like when you look at the old West and all the stages they were putting up there, they're all houses of sticks and in the mud, and they look like the people of that day. They were building them out of, like, literally on the frontier, mud and sticks. And then you have these big, beautiful dome buildings going up in the old West everywhere, and you're like, really, seriously? And so there was probably a concentrated effort, and that was probably a big part of the Civil War, as well as the War of 1812, to go through the American South and just burn it all down. And that's one of the big giveaways with the two cities that Sherman spared was Savannah, Georgia, and Charleston, South Carolina, the city I'm in now. Now, much of Charleston was destroyed in two different fires, as I pointed out, but some of it survived, and that's the big giveaway. You go through there, and it's like mud flood city. It's unbelievable, and you're like, I understand why they destroyed these now, because these cities are so much older than they are claiming, and they're buried in like 15 feet of the mud flood underground. It's like, well, that's nowhere in my history books. When did that happen? Why were they building the city of Savannah, 15 feet down? That doesn't make any sense. So I think that's what a lot of the burnings were. And so a lot of them would be concentrated in, like, the city, like the downtown areas, and they would be, they would be concentrated in certain areas, I think, for a purpose.
I'm just gonna ask another question because it doesn't seem like anybody else is gonna ask. So with the oligarchies in that time during the 1800s, do you think that they just end up like picking some of these places and just claiming them as their homes and saying like, yeah, we built this, like you said, the hunting lodge, and that they end up claiming these buildings and just kind of like like being like the wealthy elitists of the world, and then just adopted the buildings? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's always exceptions to the rules, obviously. And I don't think it's safe to say every building we see that, is of a grand design is, ancient. But I think that that's the case for a lot of them. Yeah, I do. And there's even a theory I have for. I'll go ahead and say this for the star forts. I have a theory out there on what the star forts were built for. I believe they were Taurus centric. I believe that they were built as what's the word I'm looking for? Um, Places where people had disease, outside the camp. And they were built as healing centers, and I think there would have been a priest residing over it. Well, I believe they were built as healing centers, straight out. They're always kind of on the outskirts and that kind of stuff. And so in the same sense with the train tracks, the idea is that the tracks were not built in the 1800s. I mean, they definitely built some train tracks, but they would have already been laid. In fact, one of the ideas probably on the Donner Party hoax, that was such a clear, obvious hoax. I mean, you'd start digging into it, you're like, really? Like that they were already claiming people were eating people in the mountains before they even knew about the Donner Party. I mean, it was already hitting the newspapers. And then they discovered the Donner Party, and they're like, oh, look, cannibalism. The whole thing was all set up. It's so obvious. And so one of the ideas of that is that they were the lesson to be learned with the Donner Party is stay on the trail, stay on the Oregon Trail. Don't remember there was a guy in the desert that sold them some map that was fake. Like, that's like, what's that? So they all like detoured at the last moment. And the idea was is they didn't want you discovering standing buildings. They didn't want you finding the train tracks, all sorts of things. And they were prepping. The Donner Party preceded the gold rush. The gold rush was another hoax. Not to say that nobody found gold, but James Marshall sure didn't, nor did Sutter. They were the two guys who started the gold rush. They discovered the gold. They never came up with an ounce of gold. They never discovered gold, and yet but they had to bring people out to California and as part of this, and so the train tracks I think were there, and very often when you look at the old maps, the train tracks seem to go up to where these big structures are now. And I am of the mind that it was maybe a Sukkot issue, or it was definitely a feast issue, where I think the trains would have been transportation for the people to get to the priest. That's my thought on that.
I have a question about the star forts and all.
All
It
right.
seems to me like most of those that are the pictures I've seen, they all seem to also involve water or be near water. And I'm just wondering, is my assumption correct? And would that have something to do with the healing aspect with water? I think about the pool of Siloam, or the pool where the lepers and the ill people in the day of Yahusha would go and dip themselves. The angel would trouble the water, and they would dip themselves in the pool. And I just most of the star forts I've seen have water features, big water features, and I was just wondering about that.
Yeah, I mean the key to all of this is the water and the ether. That's the two. Like think of the second day of creation, right? And really the first day as well, and the Holy Spirit hovering above. The ether above, and the stars and the uh, with the water below, the earth coming up out of the water, and maybe even solidifying, from the water. And so every single star fort that I have seen, every picture either is at the ocean, surrounded by water, or you can find remains of star forts that they've destroyed, and you could still see where the canals of water would have been. And so there are star forts today that no longer have water around them, but you could see where it was. And so they have gone to a great effort to destroy, I think, a lot of this evidence.
I love your theory about them being healing cities. And I also really like that, because if you're mentioning like about the water and how they were shaped, and it's like you were saying that it's kind of like, love and all that, that would, to me, like that would be like a picture of, being loved by the priest coming there for a healing of the nations, I guess.
Yeah, and that, in fact, in Revelation, that is the point of the priest. It says that they get access to New Jerusalem alone. Nobody else does. They get access to the tree of life alone. Nobody else does. And it says that they are to heal the nations. That's their whole role. So it's kind of interesting that I talked about the dragon at the beginning, the dragon's horde, and how we envision riches often, and if we envision riches like that, like the dragon's horde, we're probably not going to make it, because Yahusha made it clear that where your heart is, that's where your treasure is, right? And where was his heart? It was in caring for the widows, the orphans, the sick, the needy, and so for those who also had the heart of Messiah, they would have been given that role in the kingdom to take care of those people just like him. And so yeah, I think that they designed all of these all these structures is designed not for purposes of hate, but for not some bishop or pope or king sitting on his throne with all his back room full of treasure, as we always imagine this stuff. But it was for the nations to heal them. Absolutely, 100%.
But how did you come to that? Like, where did you come to that ideology? Like, what was the aha moment? I think that these are like built for these.
Well, so when I was first introduced to the mud flood was 2019, and then I started having um, conversations with different people, like on the phone, and just I didn't really know what to make of all this, and I started learning about these places, and this one guy, he's dead now, unfortunately. He died of a heart attack. He was a friend of mine. He said that he gave me the synopsis on the phone, and he never once brought up the Millennial Kingdom, but he said that he believed that he called it Tartary. He said this the Tartarian Empire which I don't believe there was a Tartarian Empire, just so everybody knows. But he said this Tartarian Empire was a empire of peace. And I said, that's impossible. I said there couldn't have been an empire of peace because all the empires have always been, the beast governments. They've always been controlling humanity and making them to be slaves. He's like, well, that's not what this was. And I told him on the phone, I said, the only kingdom of shalom that's worldwide is gonna be the millennial kingdom. And then it was like an aha moment. I was like, oh, that's the first time it occurred to me. And so, um, yeah, and then yeah, and so from there it was kind of just, I never brought that up to anyone really, and I was kind of quiet about it, and just started thinking about it, what ifs, and it just seems to be more and more reality. Any kind of Orwellian narrative, it makes perfect sense that they would flip everything and they would just lie to us about what these structures were obviously used for. And John Q put in here that that 5-hour documentary. It's a phenomenal documentary by Ewar, and what he did was in that he covered many of the same things I covered in there and here, and he was basically just taking all this research of these different people who were, talking about different elements of this, and so, I mean, I was talking for about 2 hours tonight, and I covered many things he covered in there. But as you guys can tell, it's a huge subject, so I didn't even come close.
Why don't you believe that the Tartarians existed? I haven't heard that one yet.
Well, I believe that there was a place called Greater Tartaria or Tartaria. It's clearly on the maps. In the kind of Chinese Russian region over there. I don't believe that the worldwide empire was called Tartaria. I'm talking about the Millennial Kingdom. I think that that's misdirection. I think it's something that is true that the Soviet Union did cover up the tracks of Tartaria. I think that, but no, I don't think it was called Tartaria by any means, shape, or form. I don't think the residents of the Millennial Kingdom called it that. There are elements. See, what they'll do is they'll so the starting point seems to be that people will go, okay, there was this, you can see on the old maps, this country named Tartaria. Of course, keep in mind that there are many countries that no longer exist, Tartaria being one of them, that the lands all changed their names and such. But there was a country named Tartaria, and then through the years, it kind of shrunk down and it got fractured into greater and lesser Tartaria, and like a Chinese Tartaria. And that there are elements within there that all that they were the ones that created the technology. I'm not seeing where they're getting that research or those conclusions that they created all this technology there in China and Russia that then expanded to the rest of the world. And I- that I'm just yeah, my conclusions obviously are stand alone from most of the people here. That's totally fine. Everyone can disagree with me. I think Great Britain was the ground zero for the Millennial Kingdom. So I don't think the place that we know as Tartaria was ground zero. I think it existed, but it wasn't, it was not the kingdom. Now, if I were to put on all my videos Tartaria, that's kind of almost like clickbait at this point. It's going to get a lot more views because, people, it's kind of like keywords like flat earth or whatever. You put it in and then people are looking for Tartaria. Not many people are looking for the Millennial Kingdom, right? They're looking for Tartaria. But I don't feel like I could do that and be, intellectually honest by doing that. So
I think John Q. Adams had a really good comment. He said, I think Tartaria is the name the controllers gave to hide Millennial Kingdom. And
well, okay. Yeah, well, think about this. Okay, you guys, think about this. I said this back in 2019 or 2020. That where did the children of the Watchers go in the Book of Enoch? They went to Tartarus. Okay. If and it's said in the Book of Enoch that the Watchers love their children. That's really hard for people to grapple with sometimes, to conceptualize that an angel and even a fallen angel can love, but that's true. Wicked people, evil people love people. Some very evil mothers and fathers love their children, and the Watchers love their children, and they were forced to, as a judgment, to watch them kill each other off in the Wars of the Titans. and they went to Taurus. And so you can almost see this idea that the Watchers are released. I believe we're in the age when the 70 Elohim are probably judged and done away with. All you see through Scripture, the 70 languages, 70 nations. It's 200 nations now, 200 Watchers, and they're released and they're ruling over us. And you could see them call like almost like the this millennial kingdom. They call it, the name of where their children went. They call it hell, basically. It's so Orwellian. It's a total flip.
That's pretty interesting. I could totally see that. Literally just changing the last letter of the name.
Well, Erica, so I'm not sure if you saw the or read the paper or the video I put out a few weeks ago, and my conclusions. This has led me to this, and why I believe the UK was the epicenter. And it was. I had so many questions at the beginning because I'm like, oh man, when the Millennial Kingdom happened, it was like it was an overbearing thought at first. It's taken me about 3 years to turn the stone over, and I'm just like, how do I answer all these questions? Like, I was like, if the Millennial Kingdom happened, then what about Israel? Why isn't that? Why is that not? Why was that a dead wasteland? Why was it not flourishing? Right? And if for those of you who went through the Hebrew Revelations study, that's where the lights went on. I'm like, oh my goodness. Revelation. I went into Revelation still thinking that the destruction was addressing Babylon. No, Babylon was Jerusalem, which was referring to Babylon, but I didn't realize it was Jerusalem. And Jerusalem, like the story, the Bible ends with a very on a sad note, because the promised land is now a wasteland of devils and demons and of unclean spirits. Like, who is done with it? He's like, I've divorced this land. I'm done. And so you of all the countries around the world, you look at Israel, and it's the most underdeveloped of any Tartarian buildings. You see a little bit of the tech in the city of Jerusalem, but it's mostly a flea market. And I'm like, well, where, how do you explain this biblically? Where was the millennial kingdom? Was it in heaven? Was it spiritual? What's going on? And that's where I did the whole thing on Israel, the children of Israel, as per Yehuda, that they were promised a new land, and I'd never seen that before, and I took it all through, and I'm convinced that the new land, as well as the scepter that was handed to them through the Yehuda, was given to Great Britain. Now imagine this: there are two lands now. There is Great Britain, where Israel is in. They are promised this basically this island that they will never be removed from. And then and that's all coming from Jeremiah and those passages. Everyone can read that for themselves. And then you've got Yehuda, who Yahusha goes to. He goes to the Jews. They reject him as their king. And so he's like, all right, this land is burning. This is going down. Like, who is done with this land? Who does he go to? The first nation that embraces Messiah within a decade, by like 40 AD, is Great Britain. All the records show that they were unanimously, and Rome was never able to take over that place. It was independent of Rome. And St. Augustine tried. He was a spook. He came over there with spies. They were trying to set up a network of like Jesuits, like women hangouts, and they rejected them. And I believe that Great Britain was rewarded, and he physically ruled from Great Britain. He was the king, because the king always has to come from Judah. The scepter always comes through Judah. So they embraced him, the house of Israel, but Yehuda denied him. And so that's where it all came together. And yes, you see that the Gothic cathedrals are beautiful there. I mean, it seems like that in France, in that area, that's where they're at. So another interesting one I'll be talking about. I wanted to have it ready for this one, and I told you about the chiropractor incident. And so I'm like, well, that's one thing that's not going to be talked about, is Mont Saint Michel in France, which, if you guys know where it's at, it's in Normandy, and it's actually in the ocean there. It's that famous castle you've seen where like the tide comes in and completely surrounds it. And then when the tide goes out, you could walk to it. And it's right there in the canal, the channel between the White Cliffs of Dover, like in England and France. Well, and Sarah and I had always wanted to go there for 15 years of our marriage. I mean, we like every year we had a saying, we like next year, Paris, like next year we're going there. We wanted to go see Mont Saint Michel, and so that was one of the most beautiful, glorious moments of my life when we finally got to go there and see it, and it's just an incredible castle slash. It's a mix of a castle and a cathedral, and what they tell you is, why is it called Mont Saint Michel? It's named after the archangel Michael. And they will tell you that in the Dark Ages, it was built to commemorate the exact spot where Michael the Archangel defeated Satan and hurled him down into the abyss. Okay, so even according to the official narrative, they're telling you that in the Dark Ages, they believe Revelation already happened. Think about that. But think about this. According to the story, the battle was raging over Great Britain. Why would Satan be raging over Great Britain? Well, Rome was never able to conquer Great Britain. They tried. And okay, someone is. I'm just going to. Okay, uh, if you want to say something, Aaron, just let us know, and we'll unmute you. And so the battle was over Great Britain, and Michael and Satan are duking it out, and they end up on the shores of France, and he defeats them right on that spot where Mont Saint Michel was raised. So that right there, I mean, it's just so biblical. And anyways, it goes back more and more to it seems like the UK was the place to be. And when the mud flood happens, of course, what's the first thing we hear? That the sun never sets on the British Empire. It was everywhere. It was North America. It was Asia. It was everywhere. It seems like all the over all the world, the banner of the UK was known. So, if someone else want to say something, I don't want to ramble all night. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Erica.
Sorry, I'm having mountain Wi-Fi problems. I 100% agree with you. I had started this journey, I want to say in 2019, when I heard a video by Adam Fink about Jerusalem being the true Babylon, and it blew my mind. And I saw all the verses about Israel becoming a wasteland and inhabited by the Lilith and the jackal, and however they translate all those demonic type animals. So it wasn't, I was on the same path as you, but you had so much more detail than I had thought of with all of the buildings and the architecture. And then your travels through Europe really brought it to a head. And all through scripture, they'll say, and such happened, and it's memorialized here to this day. And it says it over and over in scripture, whether it's a judgment or whatever, that this will remain until this day. So I think it's the same thing with the British thing. I think that's why they're so haughty, what they have the right to rule. And they're on the same track of what Messiah said, don't be haughty because you're Abraham's kids, because we can make anybody, into Abraham's kids. But I think that's why the British line is like in every line of royalty. And then I also think that with Israel, the reason it couldn't be the place, besides the things that you mentioned, is I can't remember the address, the chapter and verse, but in Torah, there's a curse for the innocent blood being shed. And you have to get a red heifer and do different prayers and confess and everything about the innocent blood being shed. And the people who shed it obviously aren't admitting that they shed innocent blood. They blame everybody but them, and they deny who he is and say he's in hell in a pile of excrement to this day. So the curse remains until they say it. So I don't see how Messiah could inhabit that land whatsoever. In fact, one of the extra books, I always was horrified when you read in the crucifixion stories about the Jews saying, yeah, his blood be on us and on our children. That always horrified me. But in one of the extra ones, and this is after Messiah proved himself and raised, and they even admit he's the Son of God, they double down and say, his blood be upon us still, our children's forever. So that's a pretty big curse to lift off of a area, and I don't see anywhere in history where it's ever happened. Conversely, you see huge amounts of people from the European nation going out to spread the good news to this day. you know, whether they be coming over to America since, but where did all of the, when you look at where Christianity is, where did they all start from? You know, I think it's in the European area, so I think you're 100% right. And I think there's some truth to maps and whatever, but I do think Tartaria is just a red herring. So excellent job again.
Yeah, when you for those of you who've been following along, just to kind of recap, is I have two separate papers out there. One is called Cities of the Millennial Kingdom, another is called Melted Cities. And Yahusha said, he told his disciples and the 70 that they were to go out and make disciples in all these cities. And he said that for those who reject you, for the cities that reject you, you know, shake the dust from your sandals and leave. And he said, it's going to be worse for those cities on the day of judgment than it was for Sodom and Gomorrah. All right. So Sodom, you know, it's worse. And so that my theory is, of course, you know, you can go around and you can see all these melted places, a lot in Turkey, and the Greece region, a lot in there, all around the biblical areas. There's tons of melted cities. And I think those places were rejecting Messiah. But then you go to places like Rome. Why do we have a magnificent city in Rome? Now, clearly the controllers have taken it over, and some people will argue, well, maybe Rome really was built in the Enlightenment by the controllers. I personally think that when you read the epistle to the Romans by Paul, it was one of the first cities to actually embrace Christianity. And not only that, that the founders of the Church of Rome were the very people that financed Yahusha's ministry, according to Luke. The very same people. And it's pretty crazy to think about that. So I think that they were blessed, and that city continued on. It wasn't completely destroyed. I think that there are ruins there. I think the Colosseum probably is ruins. Yes, it does resemble an amphitheater, a speaker, but obviously it was an amphitheater. I think that there are ruins there from the ancient, but I think that there are Millennial Kingdom structures there too. I think it continued on. It wasn't melted. It wasn't completely destroyed, if you guys get my drift. And then you go to places, you know, throughout France, Germany, England, and there, Russia, all the way to India, and you see uh, beautiful cities as well there. And I think they were flourishing for that reason. So, yeah.
Well, one nice thing, you know, there may be a little gap here and there in the conversation, but you know, we've got the nicest, most orderly bunch of people. You know, normally you cram, you know, 35, 40 people in a voice channel, and you get people just walking all over each other, and we don't get that here. So, you know, that's nice. I think everybody's just kind of digesting what the material that was presented, and I think our minds are somewhat blown open every time. So, you know, hard to think after that sometimes.
Yeah, you guys are. I am so well pleased with this community, and of the different communities I've either peeked into or looked at. I just see arguments everywhere, and yeah, the very proud people, um, and so I really do appreciate the courtesy and all that kind of stuff, and you guys don't trample all over me. But that being said, I always I really want to convey the message to you guys that, you know, I'm just a dude, you know, researching just like you guys, and I'm just putting my research together and presenting it to you guys week after week after week, of course. But um, it's you know, I don't have all the answers. I'm just, you know, collecting and writing what I see. But you guys, man, you guys can contribute a lot too. I'll give you guys a, a, uh, an example. Is that whole first section on royal pains, where I talked about that nobody pooped, which, you know, that's been one of the big discussion points. Why were these ancient medieval buildings and palaces all designed without plumbing? Didn't these people ever have to poop? Right? They'll tell you, you know, they maybe had a pot underneath the bed, and then they had a chambermaid came and carry their poop outside and, you know, bury it somewhere, or whatever. Still didn't have plumbing though. They tell you, like, in the moat, which is like disgusting to think about. And then they'll explain that's why there was all these diseases and stuff. But it came Rebecca. I mean, she was the one that presented to me what it said in the Legends of the Jews. I'm like, yes, that's exact that answer. Like, answered exactly, because I knew there was this connection with mana in the Millennial Kingdom, and I didn't really, but I didn't really know what to think about that until I realized that the people who ate the manna were equal in strength to the angels, and they didn't have to poop. I take that to mean that if they were equal in strength to the angels, that they could even maybe eat other food and still not have to poop. It was only the sinners, it said, the people who would be sinners, they would be in rebellion against the Torah, and they ate the manna, they would have to poop, right? But but if there was immortals ruling over the earth as kings, then we know these people would not be sinning. So, and these cathedrals and structures and stuff, I think, were built by them and centered around them. But that was huge. That came to her bring that to my attention. And so I always appreciate when you guys have things to say or things you discover and learn, and you pass it by my way. And if it looks like there's silence on my end, don't think I don't appreciate it. I mean, sometimes I get information. I'm like, okay, this is really great stuff. I don't really know how this is going to fit in right now. But then sometimes something comes along and I think about something that was given to me months ago. I'm like, yes, that's a perfect fit. So every I appreciate everything, guys. All you guys have to say in here, and this is a group effort, and so many people have been a huge contributor in my ability just to think through this stuff and research it.
Well, John Q. Adams was saying this was the first week that I hadn't said, well, according to Legends of the Jews in like 10 live shows. So I was like, I didn't have to. Noel did it for me tonight. On the subject of all these buildings, something that you were, and I've showed this before, like a year ago, but where you were talking about, all the horseshoe arches, and it would form a quad around, a patch of something, and there would just be these open but covered hallways. And even here in downtown Tucson, there is our old Pima County consolidated courthouse building is it's got a copper dome, and it's got all those arches all over the place. It really does look like a very simplified version of some of those buildings, but it's old. And interestingly, 100 years ago in this valley, the Santa Cruz River was running. It's now gone underground because we've dropped the water table so much. But that building was less than a mile from that river. So, they and when you look at the things around it, the houses really don't look anything. The houses are clearly from another era. It's just you don't realize it until you start thinking about it in terms of Millennial Kingdom, and also it's by the railroad tracks. So clearly it's from a different era than any of the houses that surround it, which are pretty much, from maybe 100 years ago with, they're adobe buildings, tiny, tiny little streets, tiny houses crammed together all around this beautiful, and it's the only thing like it in that area. All the other buildings are much more modern. So, and I wonder if they're not going to tear it down real soon, because they've moved out of there. They built some shiny, brand new, ugly 8-story building that a block away, that's just has no character, no charm. But every time I think of that building now, I just wonder when it was really built.
So Katie, go ahead, John.
I was just going to say I'm not really adding anything here, but if people have kind of like a bad mood, or you're just not feeling very well or something like that, something that works for me is just do a search for ancient cathedrals and then just sit back and look at all the pictures and the beauty. I don't know what it is, but just looking at those places just blows my mind, and just makes me wonder, because I think they were the most awesome thing that has ever been created on the planet other than us. And it's mind-boggling to think that, the narrative that they give us, that these things were done, in the 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, whatever century, I don't care, take your pick, is just totally asinine. It's just impossible. I mean, it almost had to be angelic hands that created these things, because there's just nothing we do today with all the technology that we have that even begins to compare to these things.
Yeah, and okay, so I agree. Yeah, absolutely. And Katie asked this question. She says, "Would the Black Death be disease coming upon the people who were disobedient during the kingdom, or maybe just another HIV? I don't know if we're still recording, but a psyop, a COVID." And so I've been thinking a lot about this because even as a truther, when I started to look at how all these sicknesses are hoaxes. Now, diseases are real, and people get sick based on, the poisons they put in their body and toxins, and and so on and so forth. But the idea of the virus, right, being spread, and however they explain the Black Death, being one of the greatest proofs for the virus theory or whatever, and I was thinking, did the Black Plague even happen? What's going on? And then it occurred to me, I was like, oh, you see the same things happen in the wilderness. Remember when there was a rebellion, and then Yah's like, that's it, I'm going to destroy this camp, and he starts destroying. People are dropping over dead everywhere, and Moses and Aaron run to intervene, and Moses puts up the snake, or the really it's a fiery serpent. It's a seraphim he puts on a pole, not a snake. A snake. It's literally a fiery serpent. And he puts on people. Whoever looks at it are saved. Right. I can't help but think that the Black Plague, it happened as we're coming to the end of the Dark Ages, coming towards the Enlightenment. And how many people in Europe were killed? Like 1/3 or something. They estimate like a huge chunk of people. And the Black Plague probably went all across the world, and and you hear all the stories of the people who were so afraid of getting it that they would, lock themselves up in their house, just like we saw recently, and all that kind of stuff. They didn't have a trust or faith in Yah, and yet there are stories from the Black Plague that the ones who did love Yah the most, and they were out there helping people in the streets, they didn't get sick. They were out there, they were helping collect buys, they didn't get sick. That's an interesting testimony to his faith. But yeah, I think that the Black Plague is probably something to happen like towards the end, where there was just a curse that came over them, where Yah is trying to get them to repent and be like, guys, it doesn't have to end this way. And they probably kept just like in the wilderness, probably kept rebelling and rebelling and rebelling to the point like, okay, that's it.
Well,
Um,
Yah's really big on plagues, That's how he likes to get people's attention. That totally makes sense. And if they've closed down all the healing centers because they've left, that would account for a lot more people dying, if he sends a plague.
Oh, well, Cyber Savior asked about the four horsemen of the apocalypse. So, my view on Revelation is that it was fulfilled by 70 AD, most of it. So leading up to like chapter 17 or the whereabouts, that the the plagues and the bowls of wrath and all that kind of stuff, it's all Babylon is Jerusalem. And then so even what Paul says in Romans, he says he's warning the Jews. Paul's writing this 50s. He says, you guys don't get it. The judgment always befalls his own people first. He's coming for you. The judgment's coming for you. You guys think the judgment's coming for the rest of the world? No, it's coming for you. So judgment came to Jerusalem first, 70 AD. That was Babylon. And then the unbelievers of the other nations got theirs. My thought that it happened 500 years later. That's based on multiple texts. And so the four horsemen of the apocalypse, in my opinion, it's a repeated cycle that happens all throughout history. Matthew 24 actually lines up with the four horsemen perfectly. I covered that. Eventually, probably within the next year, I'll probably read that off again, because it's insightful for people. But the first horseman was false religion, of course, and it's false doctrine that leads people towards what happened next. I think it was war. and then famine, and then disease and death, right? But one thing that really struck me about Hebrew Revelation when we read through it is that the death only affected the non-believers. And people, people are so afraid to go through the tribulation. Oh, we got to get raptured out of here because it's gonna be so bad. It's like, well, are you set apart or not? Because the judgment is for is for those who aren't set apart. Those who were set apart weren't affected. And so even with the Black Plague, I believe it was directed at the those who were not set apart, who were in rebellion. So let's see, someone else had, oh, and then so we can see those same repeated patterns now. Obviously, it is uh, false doctrine that leads people to conflict, to war, to which then leads to famine, which then leads to disease. Right? We see the same cycles now. We saw the same cycles 70 years ago with World War II. We see the same. It just goes on and on. It's unending. These four horsemen that keep galloping around the world and causing all this havoc. Right. It seems like a lot of the rapture theory is based on this notion that you aren't really truly holy. You aren't really truly set apart. You're saved purely by this notion of grace. And you're just a rotten sinner. The only thing that separates you is that you believe and you believe hard enough. But he's taking you out of the world because you couldn't survive it otherwise. And it's like that's not the story throughout the Bible, right? Like they were always in the world, and a great example of this is the Babylonian captivity. The Persians come, they wipe out Israel, and the prophets are warning them, and nobody listens. And then Yahuwah says that even though Israel played the part of the whore, Judah just ramped it up. I mean, they made it way worse, the offenses. And so he's warning them, the prophets are warning them, and Babylon comes in, kills off the kings, all his people, takes them off to Babylon. And who do they spare? The set apart, the holy ones. The set apart, like guys like Daniel and others, they're like Jeremiah. You see King Nebuchadnezzar saying to Jeremiah, "What do you want? I'll give you my treasury. You have whatever I want, whatever you want. You just tell me, and I will fund it for you." So he funded him to go set up a kingdom somewhere else. And that's a story that's not told to us much, right? But you see that with the set apart. And guys, this is what we need to think about. As all this fear pouring out there about the FEMA camps and all. I don't know if we're going to go to FEMA camps or not. I'm not saying we're not, but the thing is that what they're doing right now, this judgment that is going to come down on this world, probably in our generation, and we're going to see a huge depopulation. We all know they're working on that, so on and so forth. Who are they trying to depopulate? They're trying to depopulate the perverted people. They're creating perversion in people to kill them off. At the other end of the tunnel, who's going to be left standing? The upright people, the people who didn't go along with the agenda, who served Yah. We're going to be the ones standing on the other end. And I'm not saying we're not, some of us aren't going to make it, but that's Yah has always had his protection over his people. And so, we can stand boldly in this and go, judgment is coming first for his own people. That should, create fear in us to repent. And then he's coming for the rest of the world, and the righteous will make it through this. Because the judgment is not coming for the righteous. So.
Josh was asking about a video that somebody had posted a day or two ago in the Zombie Serum channel about people spinning to the right, looking around, twirling, and then dropping dead. Somebody posted another video that I have not seen, but I watched the three guys that were on that. My son watched it with me, and I had just got done with Legends of the Jews and reading about the angel of death and Moses begging Yah not to let the angel of death take him because the angel wanted to take him, and at the time of his death, and it says that Yah took him himself so that to spare him of that. And to me, I watched those body movements and they're saying something, and it's flying around their head and it's coming into their right side, flying behind them, going up and around. They're tracking it. One guy's flailing, and I mean, you can't see what they're seeing, but I just immediately thought of the angel of death. They're seeing, And I think there's more than one. There's probably multiple. You know how they have lots of angels that work in tandem, and I really think that that's, for whatever reason, they're seeing that. They're seeing something, and it's very freaky.
So I didn't see that video. So just in recap, what you're saying is that these people that are kind of shaking, flailing, whatever, and then dropping over dead, that they appear to be seeing something like the angel of, or what you surmise me
Oh,
that.
they're just standing there doing their business to whatever they're doing. They're standing there, and all of a sudden they look to the right, and then they look up behind them and to the back and the right, and they turn their whole body. They turn around. They do a full complete turn, and then one guy turns a few times, and he's cowering. I mean, he's clearly terrified, and he drops and goes into like a seizure. The second guy does the same exact thing, except he's flailing at it. He's trying to fight something off, and he falls in the middle of a bunch of bottles and goes into the same posture. The
Wow.
third guy, they don't even show the end because he was getting ready to board a train, and the train was coming in, and he did the exact same thing. I mean, looks to the right, looks up, spins around, seeing something, and he's trying to get away from it, and he goes right into the train under the tracks. And they cut the video. They don't show you the rest. It was somebody, the gentleman that did the video. I think there's another one. Yeah, John just posted another one. That's the one I have not seen. But the one that I did see was by a Torah guy. I don't know who he is. Kingdom something. Maybe somebody can jump in and help me out here.
So I sort of started this whole questioning about it because everybody's got those friends that are just waking up, and they always reach out to their conspiracy friend with questions. And she texted me, she goes, "Have you heard of this spinning to the right thing?" And I was like, "Yeah, I saw that video a couple days ago. You can't unsee it." So she's like, send it to me. But then I couldn't find it anywhere. So I reached out here, and that one was posted, and it's pretty good. But the one that I originally saw was about 2 minutes long, and it wasn't a big explanation. And there were actually 6 or so different people, a few women. One woman was at a nail shop, and she was doing someone's nails. Same thing. Looks to the right, arm goes up to the right, and contorts almost completely around. And then they end up in her video was closer, so you could see they all end up in this sort of cockroachy type, like when a cockroach dies, how it turns upside down. And they end up in this contorted, I don't know, like
It's a
frozen
catatonic state
stance.
almost. It's almost like
Yeah.
catatonic.
And
Yeah.
they're not dead yet. They do die. They all die. You can see them expiring, but they go into a rigor, almost like people having a seizure, right? And the foaming of the mouth and all the stuff. And what was crazy for me was I saw it and I was like, "Yep, that's demonic. That's wow, okay." And I just kind of dismissed it because we're looking at all kinds of things all day long. Well, that other video with the explanation was interesting, and I showed it to my husband because he was an EMT, and he's like, "Yeah, I've seen." He goes, "Well, I haven't seen that, but I've seen lots of seizures." And he said, "I've always thought every single one." He goes, "It seems like a demonic attack that comes on instantly. The way that the body goes into those weird contortions, they're not normal, they're not natural. And everyone's hands and feet and everything, they're all turned the same way. Their jaws are open, wide. It's very strange. It's very Hollywood, but you can tell that, I mean, from the circumstances, that it was a spontaneous thing. And yeah, I don't have an explanation,
Well,
but
if I
it's really
just
unsettling.
sort of jump in here with my opinion, do you all remember the movie? Oh, was it Ghost? I think when Whoopi Goldberg was in it, and Demi Moore and Patrick Swayze, and oh gosh, when there was a scene out out in like an alley when the really evil bad guy was going to be dying, and everything came up from under the ground to get him. It was like all of hell opened up to come get him. They were dark, and the people that these demons were after, they were flailing. Their arms were up like that. They were spinning around, and the impression I got when I just saw this one video that you all are talking about is that that has absolutely nothing to do with believers. It has to do with perhaps there is some judgment coming for some of the very wicked, and it could be a purpose for others to see it, so they know that maybe they can change and turn away from what they're doing. But from what I saw, that was just a complete horror show, and it was demons coming for those who had made their decision, had made their choice, and that Yah had turned them over to themselves. Just my opinion, but it reminded me of that scene in Ghost. So
I wanted to ask Noel about the angel of death. I mean, all the angels do have functions. Is the angel of death evil, or is he just doing his job, what he's supposed to be doing? I believe it called it. Is it Samael? In the Legends of the Jews. Do I have that right?
Yeah. He was referred in quite a few pieces of literature as Samael, including in the Aramaic Targums. And in the Aramaic Targum, in chapter 3, when Eve/Hava is being tempted by, uh, it says Satanael, or by the serpent. I think it says Satanael there. It says that she perceived the angel of death and was not afraid. And so the question I have uh, was the angel of death standing there separate from Satan? And the angel of death was like, I could take you out right now if you do this, and she wasn't afraid. Or is the angel of death Satan? And so that's a big question. Clearly, the angel of death is working for Yah. And it could be argued, and I think a good argument, that Satan also is working for Yah as well. And so a really good explanation of this is in the movie I mentioned earlier, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I love this explanation. And if you guys remember that there was all 5 of the winners of the golden ticket, they were all prearranged by Willy Wonka. There's no doubt. I mean, he in his somehow creepy all knowledge uh plotted demise of these children with the Oompa Loompas. And every single time a child got the golden ticket, Mr. Slugworth was right there to whisper into their ear and tempt them. Of course, Slugworth was working for a different candy factory, and he wanted the eternal gobstopper. And so he wanted the children to go in and give it to him. And that was, we find out at the very end, the test. Could they pass the test? And Charlie, his grandfather, suggested to him at the end. Remember, they got really upset. They didn't like who Willy Wonka was, and they're like, let's go give this to Slugworth and make money on this. But Charlie's like, no, and he went and took it out of his pocket, and he went and slapped it on his desk, and Willy Wonka said, "You won, right?" And then Slugworth walks in, and you find out that he was working for him all along. And so that's kind of a part of the mystery as to how this is unfolding. And it's very clear, obviously, that Satan is working for Yahuwah, or else he would have done away with him right away. I believe it was all part of this great contest. So is he the angel of death? I suspect so. he's definitely different than the Prince of Sheol or Baal. In a sense, I don't think Satan is Baal. Uh, some people think he is, and he may be. I think he's a different entity. Um, and I was going to say something, and then I just forgot what that was. What I was going to say. It was
No,
something slightly intelligent. Yes.
on that, didn't we have the study about where Satan was talking to not the angel of death, but the guardian of Sheol when Yahusha was coming down to Sheol to take everybody out, and they were having discussion, and the one guy was saying, "Oh, this isn't Yahusha," or Satan was saying, "Oh, this isn't Yahusha. This is like a prophet, or he's Enoch or something." And then the other guy
Yeah.
was like, "No way! Like, what are you, an idiot? This guy is definitely Yahusha." So who are those two characters? Because it seems like those, in that instance at least, I don't think it was canonical or it was like extra biblical, but it seemed like there were two separate beings having a discussion.
Yeah, there's a few different texts that talk about that, but the main one where that comes from is the Gospel of Nicodemus, and which I love, as well as the Ascension of Isaiah. And in the Ascension of Isaiah, it also gives the same account that Yahusha coming down to earth was so top secret that not even the angels in heaven knew about it. There were some angels, and in fact, the angels that appeared to the shepherds would have been in the know. Michael, Gabriel, some of those top-notch guys. But as he goes through each of the layers, he starts out in the seventh layer of heaven, and as he goes through each one, he decreases in glory, so that none of the other angels even know it's him. They didn't even suspect it, and so I don't believe that Satan knew he was the Messiah. In fact, um, who is it? Let me think. Oh, Dr. Heiser actually has the same opinion on me as this. And he says the same thing, that he says that when Satan was tempting him in the wilderness, that he was actually trying to glean information from him. He was trying to find out who he is. So when he told him to jump, he was trying to test him and see if he was the person spoken about in the psalm, that the angels would catch him, that was the Messiah. Yahusha rejected the offer. He didn't do it. And in Satan's mind, he's thinking, this guy talks big, but he's not able to come through with his claims. He's not the guy. He's not the same guy. And so, yeah, you get to the Gospel of Nicodemus, and he's really proud. He's like, he thought he was a prophet of Yah, but he thought he was a little bit crazy too, because he was making claims that he wasn't able to substantiate. And so he brings them down, and the Prince of Sheol down there, which I don't know if that's the same as Baal. I was having that discussion, I think, was it Thursday night with some of you guys, where I was like, I had well, I won't go that whole different route, but I don't know if he's Baal or not. But Baal is you guys know the Lord of the underworld, right? Anyways, so here's my thoughts on the spiritual world. We always, coming out of Christianity, the semi-woke can hopefully at least understand that the alien deception, that they're spiritual beings. But I think it's a mistake to say either they're angels or demons. I think that's a huge mistake. I think that there are three classes of spirits. And you could maybe even four, but you can classify these according to the chambers we see of Sheol and Enoch, where it says that all spirits of dead souls, they go to obviously Sheol at this time. Now I believe that the righteous go to paradise now, because Sheol has been emptied out. But before Messiah, if you were to die, you go to soul sleep, you go to Sheol, and you awake. So there's three chambers. One for the righteous, one is for the sinners, and one is for the wicked. And the very wicked, they're going to get theirs. And the sinners, interestingly enough, it seems like they depict them as people that were like, they just lived lives. They were, kind of, I guess, what you define as good people. They 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 just didn't love Yah. They didn't, do their part. They didn't, whatever. They just died, and that was it. And it even insinuates that they won't even resurrect. They just die forever. They're just dead. And then there's the very wicked. They're going to be resurrected and judged. So three classes of people. Well, I kind of think of spirits in the same way, because we see that there are the very righteous, set apart spirits, and you can classify them in multiple ways. Elohim, And then you have the cherubim, the seraphim, all different types, right? So you have the very holy, righteous ones. Think Michael and Gabriel, Uriel, so on and so forth. And then you have the very wicked, Satan. You have Samjaza, and Azazel, who I believe is Satan. You go down that list, but then there's probably a lot in the middle. So one is just pure rebellion against Yah. They have fallen. They are trying to corrupt all of humanity. They are trying to lead them to destruction. The righteous are trying to serve the set apart. They're trying to serve us on this earth. But then I think that there's a third class of like what we would call maybe the sinner spirit. Some who have sinned, transgressed, Yahuwah. They're but they're kind of like they're harvesting the earth. They're doing their part. They're the stars, the sun, the moon. They're the lightnings, the thunders, all these different elements of our earth, which is a spiritual realm, and they're doing their part. They're doing what they do. But they're maybe not. Uh, they're saying if you're not for me, you're against me, which is true. But they're not what I think of as Satan. That's just the very evil spirits. I think that there's multiple types. I think really there are in this realm, and that's like one of the things you see with the divine council with the 70, right? Like the 70, the shepherds that Yahuwah put over the earth, they weren't necessarily wicked, but they refused to teach the Torah, right? So they weren't righteous, but they were put over mankind, and so it is what it is. That's just my view. If you guys disagree, that's fine. Did that go over somebody's head? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let me give you example. This was a film that really touched me recently that I watched, and it was called My Neighbor Totoro, and it was a Japanese cartoon from the 80s. It was done by the Ghibli Studios. If you guys know what that is, it's like Pixar in Japan, and they were doing things that in the 80s that like Disney was never touching. I mean, before Pixar ever came along. And the whole film, it's just a very intimate film of two daughters and a father living in the Japanese countryside while their mother is in the hospital. A very touching story. And they come to find out that there's only the smallest daughter can see that there are, they live in a spiritual realm. There's these fairies all around them. Totoro in Japan is what we would call a troll, but the Japanese don't see the trolls as we do, like a bridge ogre. They're actually, more like a forest creature. And that's very occult thinking. The idea that children can see, spirits. They can. The Native Americans would have a saying for that. That children can see their shadows twitch, but adults can't see their shadows twitch. Right. And so the idea is that what they come to learn is that the entire realm around them is harvested by spirits. The trees grow, the plants grow, the rain comes, and it's all basically the spirits are like the earth is the agriculture of these spirits. And I got to the end of it, and you guys, I love Yahuwah. He's the Most High. He's the only one I worship. I'm not. I'm telling everyone, do not worship angels. Do not worship spirits. That is a direct command from Yahuwah. But I looked to my wife and I said, I can't disagree with this film. I think this is spot on. I think this is what the realm really is. That the world that it's harvested by spirits, and so all this to say is that I think that there are evil spirits and righteous spirits, but then there's just spirits. There's just some out there that they were all created by Yah, and they're doing their work, and they're probably not going to make the cut in the end. If you guys get my drift, they're just doing what they're functioning to do, and then they're just going to die, and they're going to be thrown in the lake of fire or something. I don't know. That's my view. So.
Well, I'm still under the assumption that Satan is not an angel, that he is a created being. And I would love to see any scripture anywhere that calls Satan an angel directly. He's always called a serpent, a snake, a beast, but never, to my knowledge, is he ever called an angel. If anyone can show me a verse that says that, I would love to see it.
Well, okay, so I agree with you that he is a dragon, but a serpentine creature. To me, that has all the the descriptions of a seraphim. The seraphim angels are reptilians, and that there are good reptilians and bad reptilians. It's crazy to think about that there are reptilians in heaven. That some of the Watchers were reptilians. So there's a passage from the what is it called? Oh, it was in the Dead Sea text scrolls. I have to think about it. It was Moses's father. It was a book written by Moses's father, and when he went to Canaan, and he was separated from his wife for like 30 or 40 years. It's some long number because Egypt and Canaan went to war. They closed the borders. He went there to the story was is that each of the patriarchs died. Joseph was the only one that remained in Egypt, and he was carted out by Moses. But all the other 11 brothers, they were, as each of them died, they were taken back and buried with, I presume, with in the cave with Yaakov and with Abraham and Yitzchak. And so they, he goes back there. And I can't remember which brother to bury, and the war breaks out. Anyways, while he's there, separated from his wife, Moses' mom was like 150 or 140, some huge number when she conceived him. But he was back there, and he had a vision of the of Watchers. There was a Melchizedek, a warrior, which very likely is Enoch, and then there was or it could have been Shem as well. But then there was another one, and he was described as a reptilian, and he was a seraphim, but he appears to be. It doesn't. I'd have to look. I don't know if it straight out says Satan. So but just I'm completely okay with the idea if he was created being. That's totally fine. But to me, he has every time you hear of a dragon or a serpent, it's almost always referencing a seraphim angel. In fact, it means fiery serpents. The serpent put on the pole was a seraphim angel, I believe, which is kind of creepy to think about. And the fiery serpents that were killing everybody, like people picture snakes. No, I think they were angels. They were the reptilians going and killing everyone. So and that's my thought that that he's not a cherubim, he's a seraphim, but I could be totally wrong about that. So that's just where I'm at.
Yeah, you gotta watch some of Paul Sandhu's teachings on this subject. He makes excellent points that the three oh man, all the way back in Ezekiel, was it the anointed cherub that covereth? Definitely an angel. The Luciferian guy in Isaiah was a man, because it literally says that his bones will be dragged through the streets and eaten by dogs. And every reference to Satan is as a beast. So what we've been taught, the majority of Christianity anyhow, is that all three of these are one and the same being. They're not. They're three totally separate beings from three totally separate times of history. And once you really, really study it, it becomes crystal clear. And now his explanation of how Satan came into being, I don't necessarily agree with, but it makes perfect sense. That when the angels and the sons of God were having their wars and their battles, and they were doing all this genetic manipulation to totally mess up all of life on the planet, that Satan was one of the beings that they created through that, and that's why he is 100% totally evil, and there is nothing good in him. Like I say, it's some deep stuff, and you really have to throw the shackles of what we've been taught off. But the explanation that Paul Sandhu gives for this, and the scripture to back it up, is mind-boggling. And I had to really, really struggle to throw off those shackles that I've been taught all of my life, and to actually see the points that he was making. And I still hold to it. I haven't seen any evidence yet that disproves his thinking and his teaching on those things.
Well, a quick question, and I don't mean to be argumentative. I'm totally fine with that. If he's created, so be it. I've heard of the multiple Satan theories, and I do believe that. I believe that there are multiple Satans, multiple accusers. But then by the time, of course, you get to Revelation, when it refers to the dragon, it says that, that's the serpent of old. It's connecting the dragon at the end to the serpent at the beginning. But I'm curious if Paul Sandu if he goes outside of canon, because as soon as you go out of the 66 books, you start seeing references that pointedly um, refer to, for example, the Apocalypse of Abraham, for example. It explicitly says that Satan is Azazel, and Azazel is an Enoch. He's a seraphim, a reptilian angel, a watcher. Um, so, I mean, I'm saying that I could find a lot of different connection. This Satan, by the way, in Ascension of Isaiah, I should point that out. His name is Azazel, and Azazel was the one who uh, uh, basically he slept with Eve. According to Apocalypse of Abraham, he actually created Cain through Eve, and he was a seraphim angel called Azazel. So, you know, I think that there are cases once you get out of the 66 canon to make a lot of different cases that I feel like to his credit he might be right, but sometimes when there's something about the 66 books that in my opinion kind of narrows the possibilities, and then when you step out of it you start seeing a broader picture of things that all kind of connect and make sense. That's just my view. So but I watch his videos. I think what you've said about him sounds fascinating.
Yeah, the quick answer to that is no. He is strictly a King James only, and that's one of the things I hold against him. But his teaching is fascinating. I mean, he's from India, and he speaks absolutely perfect English. I mean, he just blows my mind. I mean, I don't even subscribe to his channel anymore because I feel like I have gotten everything I can get from him. But yeah, he's a fascinating teacher. He really is.
Now, Azazel is definitely mentioned in canon, as scapegoat, and that is definitely in canon.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
Not just the Targums. And he's heavily in Legends of the Jews, but he's absolutely mentioned in canon. About sacrificing the one goat and turning the other one loose. It's being led into the wilderness, and the sins are being ascribed to Azazel, and it clearly says his name right in canon.
That's true. Though in canon, it doesn't directly say that, or as you say, Azazel, that is Satan, right? It doesn't make the connection in canon, I don't think. Like you could make the case using canon that Azazel is a different angel than a different entity than Satan, because I know many people will
I
argue that.
can't remember exactly how it characterizes him, but it definitely describes him. I mean, you definitely get the idea that he's one of the fallen something or others.
Azazel, I believe, came long before Satan. Satan, of course, was before Adam and Eve. But see, that's a whole other thing. With the earth being possibly billions of years old and was destroyed by the wars between the angels and the sons of God. And then, with Adam is our current timeline of only 6 or 7,000 years. And what blows my mind is people when we try to think that the earth and the only thing that the Father has done only covers 6 or 7,000 years. I mean, really? If he's an infinite being and goes on forever, what did he do for all the rest of the time? Just sit around twiddling his thumbs before the last 6 or 7,000 years? It just makes no sense.
Well, one thing I think, John, is that Satan is not a person. Satan is an office, just like the prosecutor. He's the accuser. So, I mean, literally more than one entity could be filling the role of Satan. I'm not saying that's what I believe or that's true. I'm just saying that I think it's more of an office than it is an actual person. It's more of a role.
Yeah, a good example of what you're saying, Rebecca, is that the book of Job. I think in an accurate translation of the book of Job in the first chapter, when Satan goes before the court to accuse Job, it should read the Satan, meaning the accuser. So the role of the office of the accuser went before the throne, and so it doesn't necessarily in that context identify Azazel or what we call, what we think of the dragon, the serpent. It could be any accuser. It could be anyone filling that role. So there's a case to be made for that.
You covered it. I was just going to say that, it's really because it is so mind blowing. I mean, his concept of time going back millions and possibly billions of years and what happened in the days of old. I think Jeremiah even speaks about that, the ancient one. And clearly, I mean, Jeremiah was Old Testament, so his world wasn't that old and wasn't that ancient at that time. But I mean, like I said, it's really even hard to discuss it if you haven't actually studied it and have had your mind open to the possibility of this world being billions of years old, and that these angels and the sons of God is who it was created for in the first place. Just as it says in the book of Job, when he says that, when he was laying the foundations and the pillars, they were there. The angels were singing and the sons of God were shouting for joy in the heavens while he was creating the earth. So clearly these sons of God and these angels are two totally separate beings. They're not the same. And, he explains all that. And I mean, I can't repeat enough times how important it is for people to at least open their eyes and to study his teaching on that, because it makes perfect sense. Because they're not the same thing. Sons of God and angels are not the same, and Satan is neither. Satan was created by the angels and the sons of God, and because of their illicit creation of this being and all the other things they did on earth, he became so powerful that he almost destroyed all of them. And the reason for that was he got them to turn on each other. I mean, it wasn't that he was that powerful, because you can't be more powerful than the thing that creates you, but because of the deception. And that's what he is. He's the great deceiver. All through Scripture, we read about that. He was so good at his deception that he got the angels and the sons of God to turn against each other and to do this battle that destroyed the earth so badly that the Father had to put it out with water, and that's where Genesis begins.
I have an answer for Trey, and well, it's not really maybe an answer, but he had said something about why in First Enoch is Gadriel the one that beguiled Eve. Well, the one thing you got to remember is that biblical characters had a lot of different names. You could hear 3 different names, and they can all be referring to one person or one entity also.
Another thing also, we got to realize that Lucifer is a Latin word. I mean, the word Lucifer should not even be in the Bible, period. It does mean light bringer or light bearer, I think is the literal translation. And it's used, if I'm not mistaken, 29 other times. Same exact word, but this is the only place in Isaiah that it's translated Lucifer, which is totally wrong. So when you change that, get that word out of there and put light bearer in and then read it, it just totally changes everything. Because like I said, Lucifer should not even belong in Scripture, period. It's a Latin word.
Well, I found out it was a Latin word when I saw video of them singing praises to Lucifer and mentioning him in their hymns in the Easter services, which I'm like, wow, that's interesting.
Well,
Yeah, it's a real shocker, isn't it?
well, that brings up the next point that I don't think Beelzebub is in Scripture either, and it's clear. Obviously, Lucifer is not in it's in, I guess, Latin. It's not in the historical Scripture, but that doesn't change the fact that Lucifer is the light bringer, the bearer of the occult, and of certain forms of Gnostic lore and Platonism and other things like that, and a stand-in for what John Q had shared in here, the angel of light. So whether or not it's a mistranslation is irrelevant to me, is the fact that it's all through the occult, Lucifer. So I find I find the Catholic Church singing praises to Lucifer. I've seen that same video, and I find it to be very eerie.
It's kind of a play on words too. You got to read it carefully. It never says that he is an angel of light. It says he disguises himself as an angel of light. The difference between disguising yourself as an angel of light and being an angel of light.
Well, that is true. Yeah, in that passage, it could be read either way.
Yeah, disguise and deceive are pretty close words there. I mean, they're not exactly the same, but it's they're definitely similar. I think our government and the news, they disguise lies all day long and bring them to us as truths. That's a type of
Well,
disguise.
Yahushua himself said that, he was the father of all lies. So, him disguising himself as an angel of light, it makes total sense. He pretends that he's bringing some wonderful enlightenment when he's really just leading you down in the pit.
Yeah, I actually think that Paul references is more of where we get the Lucifer connection. I know it says it in Isaiah in the Latin, but the idea that he comes to us as Lucifer, as the bearer of light. I mean, that's straight from Paul's letter.
Well, whoever it was that talked to Eve pretty much promised her the same thing. Hey, your eyes will be open. Just do it. Don't worry about the consequences. You're not going to die. Just eat it and you'll know everything. You'll be enlightened.
Oh, Pam has a question. Yeah, what's the question?
Well, I'm just wondering, if I'm just trying to take all this in, and I haven't made a confirm, whether I believe that Millennial Kingdom has already happened and we're in the little season, but I'm looking really into it. And, there's lots of evidence that I'm seeing. So my question is, like, we as Father's children in the little season, how does it work for us? I mean, I know our salvation is still based upon his precious son, right? His life, death, and resurrection. But I mean, like, I guess in my mind, when all these years that I've been a follower for Father, I've been, born into his kingdom, that I always felt that, now it just kind of went out of my head, but that we are here. I always thought that the little season, I probably because I came from Seventh-day Adventist Church, that I was taught for 40 years that the little season, it just didn't seem to me that it would be so long, and that I guess I thought people wouldn't be born, that it would just be we were taught that the resurrection, for the dead, the ones that were lost, that weren't in Father's kingdom, that when when the millennial, we were taught lots of things that were lies that I'm now seeing because Father's opened my eyes. But I'm just trying to understand. I never thought that people would be born during little season. I just thought it would be people that already existed, and that once he was released, that it would just be the dead, evil ones that would be resurrected, and we would be living in the millennial kingdom. We'd be the ones who love Father and his son, that we'd be there with him and inside his kingdom, the millennial kingdom. And then, the enemies would be, he'd be Satan or whatever his name is, would be released, and he would be trying to, get the army to go against the millennial kingdom and everyone in there, thinking he could overcome, and the battle of Armageddon and stuff. I'm just kind of mixed up with everything, so I'm just wondering. There's a lot. I'm sure I opened a big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was counting at least 3 or 4 different things I can address there. And the first and I think most important one is what you addressed earlier, like what it means for us. So Yahuwah's instructions in righteous living are eternal and forever. So nothing changes. Nothing changes about our belief in that Yahusha is our high priest and our king. We put our faith in his ability, just as you would put just as the atoning sacrifice. We just did the Day of Atonement, and the high priest would enter the throne room, and he would sprinkle blood, and he would perform the atoning sacrifice. You had to have faith in your high priest that he was going to do the job that covered the sins of the nation, right? Nothing has changed. So now we put our faith in Messiah, even if we are in eternity, a million years from now. I assume if we're set apart and righteous, we will still be putting our faith in the high priest and our king, as well as being obedient to him, right? So I've been hearing reports recently, and I've said this a thousand times, probably. Well, not I will say this a thousand times, that if you guys don't like Torah and you don't want to be obedient to the Father, you have a million outs. You have so many outs. There's no end to the excuses you can make. Okay, I have been hearing reports that some people who have come to the conclusion that the mud flood millennial kingdom is legit, they go, "Oh, thank God, we don't have to keep the Torah anymore," and they stop. I'm like, are you brain dead? Seriously? Like you weren't a dispensationalist until you found out the millennial kingdom happened and we're in the short season. So now you're a dispensationalist. So it's like you're keeping. I'm hearing reports that some people are throwing out the fall feast because they're like, well, it's already been fulfilled. Actually, Sukkot has not been fully fulfilled yet, but the eighth great day. But it's like, well, Passover was fulfilled, but you were doing that. What's your problem? Anyways, so my point is on that is that nothing has changed. Okay, Yahusha is still our high priest and our king. Yahuwah is still the Most High Elohim. He's our Father. We're to be obedient to Him. We're to do what He said until He tells me no. The heaven and earth is getting recreated, and we're not going to be doing Sukkot anymore. I'll be like, okay, cool. What are we going to be doing? Right? So we have not been given any verbal directions, being given anything different. All right, the short season. I kind of think actually we refer to it a lot, and I'm not so confident of the short season anymore. I think it's only in the Greek text. When you look at the Hebrew Revelation, I don't think it says short season. I'd have to refer back to it again. It gives more the idea that Satan will be released to obviously to lie to the whole world and to deceive the whole world. And it doesn't really give a pattern of time. We don't really know. We're kind of left hanging, like we don't really know. It could be 10,000 years. I don't think it's gonna be that long, but it could be 30 years to 10 days. It could be 250 years. We don't really know. And the fact of the matter is that one of the biggest arguments people have, the two big arguments people have, is the whole thing about the millennial kingdom can't happen until New Jerusalem comes down. And in my mind, I've really debunked that. In my mind, the other big one is that, but no, you're disagreeing with the Bible because it says when His kingdom comes, it's forever, and you're lying because you're saying that His kingdom isn't forever. And that's actually the point. Is I'll then bring up Revelation chapter 20. I'll say, well, how can you explain this stuff? Because it says that the whole world is deceived at the end of the kingdom, and they are then surrounding this camp of Yah, and it's all in darkness except for this one little camp, and the whole world is being led by Satan to attack and kill Yahusha. They're not going there to hand him flowers. They're going there to kill the guy. And you talk about a grim ending to the story. It always ends like this in the Bible, right? We're brought in, Israel's brought into the promised land. They're kicked out. Then the Jews are kicked out. They're brought back, and then finally, Yahuwah destroys Jerusalem. He's like, I'm done with this place. It always ends this way, and that's how the kingdom actually ends. Now, keep in mind, the kingdom is forever. Yahusha is king. That's actually can be argued because I actually think when Yahuwah, the Most High, comes down in New Jerusalem, that the scepter and the crown is handed to the Most High, and He will be ruling us, and Yahusha will be stepping to the side. Now, those might be fighting words, but the kingdom is still forever. The kingdom of heaven is forever. It hasn't gone away. And one of the things I want to address, I want to do a whole study. Many people will say that, like preterists, will say, but no, it's not talking about a physical kingdom. It's talking about a spiritual kingdom because the kingdom is within. And I say, well, wait a second. I know he said that, but it's like you look at so much literature through the prophets, through extra biblical books, all through, they were very, very clear that the coming kingdom in the future world was physical on the earth. There's no doubt about that in my mind. It's not just a spiritual thing in each of us. Well, what Yahushua was saying was that I actually found a really interesting passage. I'll be reading from it when I develop this paper from the Book of Britain. And in the Book of Britain, Yahushua is talking about, he says the lion and the lamb, great Mandela effect passage. I actually found a residue. He actually says, when the lion lays with the lamb. I'm like, yes. And he says that, how the kingdom is within each of us, but when the whole world, he says that when the lion lays with the lamb, that is a sign that the whole world has embraced the kingdom. And so you could then take that logic and say, well, when the lion doesn't lay with the lamb, it's because the world is in rebellion against the kingdom. So anyways, that's where I think we're at. I just think we're at a place where, yes, the kingdom is still within us if we embrace him as our king, but the world has rejected the kingdom. So the kingdom still exists. It hasn't gone away. It's just we are in a very dark spot right now. It's almost like in the Lord of the Rings movies, Tolkien. We kind of bring this up a lot here, but if you remember the Peter Jackson films, I know Josh is probably like sighing right now, rolling his eyes. But if you look at the Peter Jackson films, they're like there's a few good guys and they're surrounded by just tons of darkness and evil, and you're like, how are they going to get out of the situation? And then something like miraculous, like an intervention from the creator comes in, like this pillar of light, and and they destroy the enemy. And that's what's going to happen, in the invasion. Oh yeah. Oh, one more thing. There's a great passage in so the question is what's stopping Satan from invading the camp of Yah? All right. And I think Satan, he wants New Jerusalem. He wants not to, the camp of Yah. He wants to destroy it. So what's stopping him from doing it now? Well, there's a great passage in the Aramaic Targum in Isaiah. I have to pull it up. And it says that, no, is it that book? What is it? Oh, it's one of those books. I'm gonna have to pull it up. I wrote it down. I have it somewhere. And it's saying that what he's waiting for is he has to wait for every last soul, for every last reservation. All right. And this is straight in line with Second Esdras. Hopefully everyone's following my line of logic here. Where Ezra asks the same question. He's like, why can't you just bring in the kingdom now? Like, what's stopping you? And he's like, well, you gotta think here that there's a specific there's a certain amount of souls that have to be born. There's a certain order that has to happen. So I kind of think what's happening is that there are still reservations to be made. There are still souls being born, and Satan is doing everything he can. This explains why there's so many abortions. He's trying to kill them off. It's a numbers game. He's trying to limit the amount of people who can grow up and accept Yahushua as their savior, and he's trying to delay the inevitable and prolong his life, I think. So I don't really know how long this so-called short season is going to last. I couldn't say. I couldn't put a year on it. I don't know how long it's been. I don't know if it'll be 250 years. If it really started in 1850 and everything up to that was a lie. I have no clue. I have no clue how long we're gonna be in this. Hopefully I kind of answered that and didn't confuse things.
No, you didn't confuse me. And I believe, like you do, that I think when Father brings down his heavenly New Jerusalem, that Messiah, Yahushua, will hand over the king. I agree with you on that. I believe that. I think he was given the kingdom for that 1,000 years when he built his kingdom here on earth. I agree with that. And I just, it's just a lot of programming that I've been, from the false lies of the Christian churches and things that, I have to get out of me. So it's amazing. It really is. I appreciate you answering. So where is the millennial kingdom? I mean, is it is it over the ice wall somewhere over there? I mean, why would you remove it so we can't see it in this time?
There's an interesting passage, and so we can see in some of the prophets how they'll talk about when the future kingdom is brought in, that the set apart will rebuild the cities. And so that the presentation I gave tonight, I think that's what we're seeing. And it was the star cities, the star forts, the castles, and all the, the city of Paris, and they were all built by the Millennial Kingdom. And then there's an interesting passage in Enoch where it talks about when the Watchers are released, and the Watchers are only released after the Millennial Kingdom, and they, they're, in my opinion, clearly they're running the world now. They've been released after the Millennial Kingdom. It says that they would be like these ravenous lions coming out of caves, and they would trample over the cities. And so, and they would be like dethroning things. And so, it is my belief that they, the first thing they did, the Watchers, is they had to, they took over the cities. The people of the kingdom bowed out. They left, based probably persecution and other things. And Yahusha's like, okay, guess you guys don't want it. We're leaving. And I've shown passages like in Odes of Solomon and others that have insinuated that that's exactly what would happen. That the Yahusha, there's one ode that is written specifically by Yahusha where he's saying how there's going to be the shroud of darkness around him, that people won't see him anymore. He's still here, but people won't see him anymore. So there is a camp of Yah, and it's according to Revelation, it seems to be in the center of the earth, because Satan is going around the four quarters of the earth, and I believe that it's probably very likely, the North Pole region. There's a lot of keep in mind, this is the camp of Yah. New Jerusalem hasn't come down yet. We don't know how big the camp of Yah is. The North Pole is heavenly. I mean, people think Antarctica is the North Pole is too. I think Rob Skiba said before he died, he said that the North Pole sounds like a far more interesting place to look into than Antarctica, and the whole Hyperborea and all that. So I don't know. Hopefully that answered that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I looked into Hyperborea and the North Pole, and how that was where probably the Garden of Eden was there, the true north. And yeah, so the four rivers come out from there. So it's very fascinating. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Yeah. One other thing, and someone else asked a question about Paul. I want to get to that too. One other thing to look into, Pam, is I've talked about it a lot, and I have a stack of things to get to, and it's just something I haven't gone to, and I want to present a bunch of research on the moon map and show why this realm we live in that we call Earth is far bigger than what they advertise. I personally think the globe deception is very much so a post-millennial kingdom deception, that Satan needed to, that he wasn't just trying to hide a creator, he was trying to hide the creator, like literally like hide him. And that if you were to take the AE map, it's probably only like 1/3 of how large the realm really is, that there's actually a lot more land. And that can all be explained, of course, by the moon map. And I, suggest looking into that, and we could talk about
Yeah.
that.
I have looked into that too, and watched some videos and things, and it's very, very, I believe that there's a lot more land out there than what they want us to know.
Right.
Yeah.
It opens up tons of possibilities. So someone asked on here, let me see, who was it? Was it can't remember who asked the question. Maybe they're not here now. Did someone leave? Maybe not. Someone had a question about Paul. Okay, well, maybe I could scroll up here. Oh,
Hey,
Mary Ann.
yeah, that was me, Noel. So, if it's okay, I didn't want to change the subject, but so we were studying Hebrews this week because it was Day of Atonement, and we were reading about the priest and how Yahusha is the priest. And then I was studying about how most likely a lot of people think that Paul did not write Hebrews, the book of Hebrews, and just looking at some of the reasons why. And one of them was that he didn't sign his name like he always does, like I, Paul, write this. And then one of the other things that I read, it was on a commentary from an article, but it said that from most of the letters of Paul, he quoted from the Masoretic, whereas Hebrews was quoted from the Septuagint. And then I started thinking about that later. Like, the Masoretic wasn't written till the 6th century, and I believe it was completed in the 10th century. So how would that be possible for Paul to quote from the Masoretic? And so it just made me think, like, because I remember you mentioning, and I'm with you on that, I think Paul was, based on the letters of, was it Clementine, the guy that started with a C? I might be saying his name wrong, but based on his letters, and then based on the book of Acts, that the disciples did affirm him. But then his letters that he wrote himself, I mean, has anyone else here looked into this to see, did he quote from the Masoretic? And if so, does that show that his works were at least, kind of doctored with by the church? So I just, before doing all the work and trying to research it myself, I figured I'd bring it up here just to see if anyone else had ever heard of that or looked into it.
Okay, so what you just suggested, I never thought about that before. If you could show that there were quotes from the Masoretic, would that be proof? Would that detail that the church later on corrupted? That's a very interesting thought. Here's my understanding of Paul, is that it seems that he was quoting from the LXX. So I don't know who was saying that he was quoting from the Masoretic. Maybe very more wishful thinkers who were trying to. I mean, everything I've seen is that the LXX is like the most legit, far more legit translation than the Masoretic. And those are fighting words because some people, the King James only people, they want to keep to the their translation, which comes from the Masoretic. So I think Paul was quoting from, well, he was either quoting from the LXX or from a source that matched the LXX closer in Hebrew. All right. And so on the Hebrews, I mean, it's just, this is like my opinion on this, and it really doesn't matter on this point because people are going to just disagree, a room full of people. I do not believe Hebrews was written by Paul. Yeah, there's some similar things to what Paul talks about, but it's very different. And again, this doesn't matter. I suspect Hebrews was written by a woman. And probably I would guess Priscilla if I had to name a person. I do believe it was written by someone from the Church of Rome. And the reason I say that is specifically, I do not believe that the person who wrote Hebrews had ever been to Jerusalem. And it has been pointed out that some of like they're trying to describe the temple, they actually get a couple details wrong. It comes across, it does. I'm sorry, there's some infallible. It's not infallible. It's a letter that I think there's a couple things wrong in there. I don't throw it out. I'm like, oh, it's all, it's like, no, somebody wrote a letter and I think they got a couple things wrong. And I think specifically in the passage about, I'd have to look, naming like the menorah, they put it in the wrong place. And so it's like, okay, so you clearly haven't been to the temple. And so I don't think Paul would have made that mistake. I think that was a rookie mistake, and Paul would have been very familiar with the details. So all that to say, I think someone else wrote it. But again, that's just my opinion. It doesn't really matter on that. Yeah. And I think that some people have pointed out that the language use does seem a bit more. I mean, this is going to sound sexist or whatever it sounds, but it's a bit more effeminate. It seems yeah. So that's kind of why I suspect a woman wrote it. And I love Hebrews. I think it's a phenomenal book. I really like that book. Like, one of the things that seems so left field about it is the whole Melchizedek priesthood. You never once hear Paul ever bringing up the Melchizedeks. He never talks about that. And then, like, one of the huge main themes of that book is that it just seems like a very different writer. But you get to the end of Hebrews, and it seems like I think he there's a greetings to, who was the greetings to? Was it Timothy? I think it was. So it seems like some of the same people that were yeah, I've heard of Apollos too, Lisa. It seems like some of the same people, the same circle of people, in Paul's crowd and Peter's crowd and all those people wrote it. I don't know if I confuse him or answer your question, but that's my response.
No, that's very interesting. Yeah, and that's kind of what we were looking into it too, because of the Melchizedek part, and because we were actually reading about it on the Day of Atonement, just looking at how Yahusha is now our high priest and just kind of reading into it there. And speaking of, you mentioned that there might be a couple things that were not correct. I was wondering, like there, when it was talking about Melchizedek, it was bringing back where Abraham met Melchizedek and gave him a tithe or a tenth when he came back from, rescuing Lot. And it kind of it sounded like it was alluding to that would have been Yahusha at the time, but where I know, and I'm not sure, the accuracy of Jasher either, but Jasher says that was Shem. So, that was kind of something that my husband and I were just like, yeah, I'm not sure. Here, it really makes it sound like that was Yahusha, but then, Jasher tells us that was Shem. So that was another thing there. So I don't know if you caught that too.
I never caught that it seems that no, I see what you're saying. I never caught that before, that it seems to say that Yahusha might have been the same Melchizedek. I always just kind of took it like, he's the same priesthood of Melchizedek. But yeah, I'll have to look at that again. And of course, it's more than Jasher. There's multiple texts that accredit Shem to being the Melchizedek there. All right, guys. Well, it is getting late, and we got a week of Sukkot ahead of us. So hopefully everyone has a great Sukkot, and whatever you guys are going to do, we're going to be setting up. We're usually on travel for Sukkot, in temporary dwellings, so on and so forth. We're going to be setting up a tent on our upstairs patio. It's like a big wide, like kind of on the roof of the house. It's a big wide area that with railing and everything, so we don't have to worry about falling off. We're going to set up a tent up there. It'll be fun. Have a camp out for like an entire week in our own house. We get to come back into our house and do our work, and we'll do whatever, but camp out every night. And of course, Monday will be a high Sabbath. So, anyways, hope everyone has a good week, and I'll see you guys next Sabbath or this Thursday if you guys want to come by for the very controversial Auschwitz read. And it's gonna be a blast for sure, or an experience. And no, see you guys throughout the week here. And I'm signing off, guys.
Thank you,
Could I
Noel.
give you? Could I ask you one more question and take 2 more minutes, Noel,
Sure.
about Sukkot? I've been, I have not done the feast. I mean, I've been in Torah for a year, and Atonement. Well, it wasn't a feast, but it was the first one I actually tried my hardest to keep because I've been so confused about how to do it alone. And I don't know what I'm going to do for Sukkot. And I'm just wondering, because I don't have the ability to build a sukkah or the materials to do so. And I'm handicapped, disabled with my shoulder. So I just physically can't do it. Do you think it's okay to just kind of hang out on my patio as much as possible, eat my meals outside, maybe even just sleep outside, and that be acceptable to him, for now until I can do it properly?
See, I want to be real careful about answering questions like that and claim to be the spokesman for Yahuwah on these matters. Oh man, maybe some other people have good advice on that. I think
I'm not really asking for, I'm not saying, hey, I need you to tell me this is okay. I'm just maybe asking you if, given my situation, if you could maybe give me some guidelines of something I can do to at least try to honor it in the best way I can at this point.
set up a pillow fort in your living room. That was actually going to be the backup plan if the tent didn't work out. Like we were going to set up a pillow fort all weekend in the living room. It's okay. Here's the thing. I think that we have the Bible, the true Bible, right? Yah's ways are so alien to us. We have been alienated from them, and we're coming into them in our adult life. We don't have the elders of Israel to lead us. We don't have, in your situation, you don't know anybody around you. I don't either. We're totally on our own in this family. And there's some other Torah people in the rest, but that's beside the point. And so what you've only been in this for 1 year. And there, I think in the Judaism of Yahushua's day, they actually gave a 2-year grace period. Like, okay, you got 2 years to take this seriously, and if you don't, you're gone. This is one of those things where Yah knows your heart, and he's in the Ruach is going to teach you and instruct you. And as we are going to start acquiring knowledge, and what he wants with that knowledge is us to not just have head knowledge, but do something, act, right? Be obedient. And as you learn more and are more obedient, then he will be like, okay, let's take the next step and do it further and further, and you'll get there. All right, that's what I'm saying. Like don't. I remember my first fall feast. It was, man, we butchered it. I mean, you're doing better than we did. I mean, we were like, oh man, I just screwed up, and I was just praying like, oh, forgive me for really screwing this up. I don't even know what I'm doing. um the Day of Atonement, what's that? What am I supposed to, what is that, like? So just find a way to you know honor him through this. So, okay, so there's two high Sabbaths coming up, the following two Mondays. Take the high Sabbaths off. It says it's a feast day, make it a feast, like, I don't know, treat yourself to a really nice meal. And um you know and um I I don't know. Like, obviously, you're not going to go camping, right? So, just, I don't know. Just do. I don't know. Just do something that, pray to God. Just be like, what can I do to, like, just honor you through this time? And that's all I can say.